Well, I want to welcome everyone this morning for joining us on behalf of ACT IAC on this day. We're talking about positioning for successful delivery for CMS missions. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jeff Shen. I work for a company called Red Team Consulting. I'm the chair of the Small Business Alliance, which is a group within ACT IAC. I know we have some new members here who have not been a member with ACT IAC before. Just by a show of hands, who is familiar with ACT IAC? Please raise your hands. You see, I asked that the wrong way. I wasn't thinking. Who is new to ACT IAC? We have a handful of folks. I'm not going to give the stump speech on ACT IAC, but I'm going to give you a very high level on what ACT IAC is. And I'm just going to take a few minutes before I hand it over to Nam. So ACT IAC stands for American Council for Technology. IAC is Industry Advisory Council. A quick way to look at ACT IAC is that we're an association that was built to foster communication and collaboration between government and industry. The ACT side is government. For those of you that have been very involved with ACT IAC over the years, we used to be called the Gypsy. If you guys think acronyms are difficult now, imagine the Gypsy. 2 consonants, a vowel, and 2 consonants. Do you see those acronyms anymore? No? It used to be called the Federation, I'm going to test myself here, Federation of Government Information Processing Councils. It was started in 1979 at the suggestion of OMB and GSA to create a government forum that allowed for government and government communication. It was changed to ACT IAC in 2004. Now, IAC wasn't created until 1989, and that's the industry component. And so really now when we look at what ACT IAC does, what we're trying to do is create an objective and ethical forum where government and industry can communicate and collaborate. And so a lot of the events, programs, webinars, sessions, white papers, everything that ACT IAC does is meant to improve that communication collaboration. Now I'm here representing the Small Business Alliance, which is just a small area of ACT IAC. And really what we're here to do is to foster the interests of small businesses. Small businesses make up 70% of our membership. And we need to work with them and how they work with large businesses, how they work with federal agencies. And I'm now the new chair of the Small Business Alliance that just took over this month. And it's been in existence for a little over a year. We have our kickoff meeting next week, and I encourage you, for those of you who have not been involved in the Small Business Alliance, to please get involved. It's taking place on Tuesday next week, and I believe it's at IBM's offices here in DC. It's Tuesday next week from 3 to 5 p.m. If you are interested, Casey Harris, please raise your hand. Please contact her. She will send you the invitation for this kickoff meeting. And the one thing I'll say about the Small Business Alliance this year, what we're going to focus on, we're really going to focus on working with government. What I want to know is really the challenges that that federal agencies are facing as it pertains to small business. So we're going to look at the projects and initiatives that we can work on, helping agencies improve in how they work with small business. One other thing, actually a couple other things. All of you see you have a penguin on your badge. Yes, it's a penguin. We are going through a membership recruitment drive, and as I've been told this morning, penguins like to gather together, and so I can't believe Casey's making me say this, but yes, going through a membership recruitment drive right now, and you know, Casey, what is the slogan again for this?
Don't go it alone.
Don't go it alone. So really what we're trying to do is if you know someone who might be interested in ACT IAC, please encourage them. We're here to work together, both between government and industry. You owe me for that, for talking about penguins. Okay, and then we have one last thing. We have a Data Act forum coming up in the next couple of weeks. Herschel, are you here?
I'm right here.
Give 20 seconds to talk about the Data Act forum.
Sure, thanks, Jeff. So my name is Herschel Chandler. I co-lead the ACT IAC Data Act project. Briefly, the Data Act is going to require all federal financials, contracts, and grants to be published online. All agencies are going to have to take data out of their financial management systems, map it to a standard that OMB has set, and send that information on to Treasury so that we, the citizens, watchdogs, can use the information, and so that agencies have a better financial capability to compare one agency to another agency. The forum is in this space on July 29th. The 2 days prior, we have a data-thon at the same IBM offices, so a hackathon using Teradata as a tool technology. And importantly, for small businesses, part of the forum is a data zoo where we're asking businesses or government to come show us the art of the possible. So if you have an application, a program, a demonstration of the art of the possible when it comes to data science, data analytics, to come present at that, you just have to buy a ticket to get in. You don't have to sponsor, although we're still looking for sponsorships. So it's a really good opportunity for small business to get engaged. I'm around all day if you have any questions. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Herschel. So now I wanted to introduce Nam Nguyen. I wish I could take credit for this wonderful event, but really I had very little to do with it. I wanted to introduce Nam Nguyen, who is really the brainchild and architect for having all of you here this morning. He's an active volunteer in the Small Business Alliance. I remember the call that we were on months ago when we talked about the genesis of this event. Nam's background, he's had a very strong track record of launching complex enterprise systems, organizational development, corporate strategies, and BD within CMS, IRS, DoD, and NASA. And he's worked with CMS on many programs, front and center on the health reform effort. And Nam's going to be your moderator, introduce today's topics, talk about the speakers, so without further ado, Nam Nguyen, thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Good morning, everyone. I'm thrilled today to gather here, not only to hear, but to engage with the Health and Human Services and the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services. As HSS and CMS continue to foster health transformation, find new ways for innovation, and maintain operational excellence, we want to partner with the industry to support that. We, the business community, supporting both commercial, industry, and government agencies, are interested, actually very much interested, in harnessing our expertise and effort to support HSS and CMS mission. Today, you will get more insight about the business opportunities at CMS and HSS, contracting with CMS. CMS IT contracting challenging. The strategic partnership acquisition readiness contracts work. Upcoming opportunities. Then you will engage in many topics critical to the success of the agency mission, including unleashing the power of data and innovation to improve health. Case studies, if you will, on CMS Agile implementation. Bring about keyword. Infrastructure and technologies, cloud computing implementation, shared services, hosting services, and DevOps implementation. Before each session on the agenda, I will introduce our distinguished speakers. But at this time, I would like to thank you all the attendees and contributors from different government agencies, including the Health and Human Services, the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, the Office of Director of National Intelligence, the State Department, the General Service Administrator, Federal Acquisition Services. I don't know if Jennifer is here, but I especially would like to thank you, CMS Enterprise Planning and Performance staff, for helping us coordinate and prepare the event. We want to show everyone that we are very excited about a new and enhancement of the government-industry collaboration. Please give the speakers and the government attendees a loud applause of appreciation. Thank you very much. The first session will be about CMS opportunities. CMS opportunity, a view from the T2 Exchange Health community. I do want to pause here and introduce David Blackburn. David has been a successful federal health leader for the past 15 years. But more important to me and to many of you, as we know, David is an outstanding community builder. Many of us in here got to admit that David's leadership and contagious passion, the G2 Exchange helped provide this community with actionable insight that enable us to make sound strategies and better decisions that in turn provide even more value to our government efforts. In the interest of our dialogue with the government, let me tell you how David describes very accurately about the role of many of the federal health executives in here and leading professionals in this meeting. I stole it from LinkedIn, sorry. Federal health executive and leading professionals are busy people entrusted with a lot of responsibility. They are expected to identify, pursue, capture, and write winning proposals, serve as the chief researcher, marketing engine, subject matter expert, relationship czar, contract negotiator, and be able to write like the wind on any topic. And this is the work that they do outside the string of corporate meetings they are expected to attend. If this sounds like you, please give David a huge applause for his continued contribution to our work and success.
Thank you very much, Nam. So look, I will say I've been involved in planning, 100 events probably over the course of my career. And I'll say Nam and his team have done an excellent job, as you guys can see by the fact that there's people that are trying to get in and it's a packed house. So excellent job. I did want to say this is excellent. Just a round of applause. So, and again, David Blackburn, G2 Exchange Health. I see a lot of our members in the room. I'm glad to see that, and a lot of new faces as well from IAC. So I went through the leadership program several years ago. I'm a huge fan of IAC, and I do encourage anyone here who is not involved in the organization to seriously look into it. It's a great organization that brings together government and industry. So I was asked today to come in and talk about opportunities at HHS, growing business, how do we go about doing this, what are strategies for small business. I get that there's a lot of large business here, but hopefully you guys will learn some things as well. But I hate this picture, to be frankly honest. This was, as I was looking around trying to think about what is the best way to describe who we are, this to me epitomizes a lot of where we are as companies, right? Hopefully you have a tool, hopefully you have a goal with some things going on. If you don't, well, you're trying to get a goal, right? But the point is where you are, you're trying to grow, you're trying to expand, you're trying to figure out how to make do with what you have and expand in that space. But at the same time, you're always looking to expand your capabilities. You're always looking to grow into new territory, diversify, do things that you would expect. How many new business developers do we have? People that are responsible for new business development. Okay, good. A lot of you guys, right? So you guys are that fish taking that leap, right? It's a risky move, and I'm not sure that this fish is going to make it. Hey, I don't know. That's not quite right. But the point here is that it is a risky move, right? To try to expand a new territory is challenging, right? Is to make that leap. But that's what we're here to do, is to continue to try to talk about how do we expand, especially for small businesses. So why are some firms winning more? I will tell you today, I'm going to give you, this is a lot of my opinion and perspective. As kind of the community organizer for G2 Exchange Health, I get to see a lot from a higher level view on what are companies doing? What are the key investments they're making? What are the approaches they're taking? And how does that result in wins? And I'm going to tell you, it's not luck, right? The companies that win, they win because they continue to make the right moves. And you can see the companies that flounder a little bit. Maybe they're doing some of the things right, but they're not doing it all together. So I'm going to talk to you about a little bit of what we're seeing, and again, specifically across the federal health market, and we'll talk about some of those examples. So 3 things that I'll focus on today are focus, invest, and educate. And these are what these companies are doing. I'm also going to channel a few of the leaders out here. You guys probably know some of these guys, but these are people that I look up to. They're out there. They have a statement. They're putting their voice out there and talking about different approaches for how to grow business. Guy Timberlake, if you've been on social media, if you've seen him, it's impossible not to see him. He's the founder and CEO of the American Small Business Coalition. And he talks a lot about, I know a couple of you guys were at the recent event we held, but he talks a lot about open data and competitive intelligence and the fact that the data is out there. And I am a data geek at heart. So, what I believe is this, which is, and the guy will say this, is the data is out there for you to be able to understand your environment and do a better job of selling in and increase your win percentage. Peggy McShane with Net New Growth, you guys are very familiar with her, excellent BD marketing consultant. Also, I know she has quite a reputation for social media, does an excellent job of kind of talking about how companies can use social media to engage with their prospects and customers. I will say Peggy McShane just joined G2 Exchange to help us with our advisory board committee, so if you're interested, talk to Peggy. And then Brian Hebel, we'll talk a little bit about him as well. Some of you guys have probably seen his book, but this is a CMS acquisition leader who came out with an insider's perspective, right? He was willing to step it out there. If you haven't read the book and you're doing business at CMS, you really should. And we'll talk a little bit about it. I'm not going to take all this stuff because I want you to actually buy the book, but I'll give you some highlights. So focus, again, this is what it's all about, right? It's how do you focus and what is that process? But these companies that are winning, they develop their identity. They're trying to figure out who they are, and they're being very focused. There's lots of bright, shiny objects out there. Some of you guys are probably here because this is a bright, shiny object, right? But it's the fact, right, which is how do you focus? And if you're small, you have to know who you are, develop that identity. The companies that develop that identity win. Right? So how do they get that focus, right? And I'm not going to go through a lot of this because this is 101 stuff right here, but we've all been through this, right? We're going to focus on finding customers who buy the way you sell, or what you sell, excuse me. So we do BPM solutions. We do web, whatever it may be. So I know NIH, they have an organization that does web. I don't know. We've all been through that. Where the challenge is typically what happens is what you get to the point where you narrow down to these 10, 15 organizations, and hopefully they're not agencies. They're optives, they're centers, they're institutes. They're smaller program offices. But you get to the point where you're like, these are the companies, these are the agencies we want, but then the shiny object comes and you run away and you forget about it, and you revisit maybe a year later, maybe 2 years later. The companies that are winning don't lose sight of it. They narrow it down, but more importantly, they even take the next step, right? Which is they say, not only do we care about buying customers that buy what we sell, what we care about is finding customers that buy the way we sell. And by that I mean, and again, this goes to the big data geek stuff, which is, it's competitive intelligence, right? It's understanding, does that customer that I want to talk to, do they buy the way I want to buy? Do they buy cost plus? Well, do I have an accounting system that's prepared to do that? If they don't, I can go talk to them, but you know what, they buy cost plus. So I'm going to end up selling. Do I want to do that? It's a trade-off. What contract rules are they using, right? You can find this information out. It's very easy. Government, organizations, and anybody really is a creature of habit. If you will spend your time focusing on figuring out how they buy, you're going to find that they do the same thing over and over again. Do they evaluate LPTA, best value? Do you do better in one of those competitive situations? Which contracting shops do they use? Are they even doing their own contracting? Are they shipping it out? Because that's a big if. All of a sudden it's over TLI or it's over GSA. You lose a little bit of that. Do they prefer certain business classifications? We know CMS is historically been an 8A shop, right? Maybe some things are changing there, but the point is understanding that customer and how they buy. Competition level, again, we all want less competition, but understand that competition and what it does to the funnel. Is it LPTA or is it going to drive down the price? Certifications required, CMO level 3, right? Anybody in this room who's pursuing work at CMS probably knows that CMO level 3 is becoming a requirement. They won't state that, but it's true. And then what evaluation criteria do they use, right? So this information is out there. You can find out how are they weighting their evaluation criteria. So, and I say to say, it's about the who, what, when, where, how, why, right? And that's ultimately what you're trying to figure out. The challenge is it takes time, it takes grit, and the companies that win are the ones who focus in on this. And they don't lose sight of this. Because again, if you're a small company and you're up to 30 companies that buy what you sell, how do I get to 15, right? How do I get that to a smaller amount? It's manageable so that I can really focus my efforts. Well, how do you get the information? You can buy it, and we all, I think everyone in this room has bought 1, 2, maybe 5 of these services over time. You probably have many of them. The problem is what, right? It doesn't necessarily always satisfy your needs, right?
Sometimes it does, but you still have to do the digging. Very high level, not saying you shouldn't get these, but understand what they are. They're not going to get you the competitive intelligence without some hard work undertaken, especially if you're a small company. All right? If Guy Timberlake was here, he would talk to you about open data, right? So some of you guys are probably familiar with a few of these resources, and I won't go into all of them right now. We'll talk a little bit about a couple of them, but the big one I'll focus on here is FPSG. How many people in here use FPSG? Okay. How many people feel like they're experts in FPSG? Okay. Yeah. That's good. Well, and don't get me wrong. What I'm going to tell you is easily one of the most powerful tools out there in terms of being able to provide intel. And I say that to say, look, if you're trying to figure out, I want to sell web services and I want to sell to this organization, you can really narrow in and understand the buying, how they buy, right? What vehicles are they using? And any facet that's on here, are they buying cost plus? Are they buying by socioeconomic category? You can very easily narrow down and figure out, is this the right customer I should spend my time on? And again, this is how you get focused. If they buy the way you sell, you're going to increase your odds of winning, and you're going to increase your odds of winning the type of work you want to win. So again, companies that are winning, we're seeing them be very diligent about this. So kind of moving off of that. So again, companies have now narrowed down. They now have an identity. They know that they're focused on 10, 15, 20 organizations, depending on the size they are. And again, not agencies, organizations. And that really informs their investment. Now they can go through and say, all right, let's aggressively pursue this organization that we know buys what we sell, buys the way we sell. Let's focus our BD resources on. Let's fill the gaps that we know. And sometimes you're going to have gaps, and we need to get that BPA, so let's go get that BPA. We know that they award them. Let's go ahead and figure out how we can get one. Refining the marketing messages and materials, right? So being able to really write to that group rather than what we all do, right? Which is write to this generic health IT. We do all of these things. You know, that doesn't resonate with the ultimate customer. Focus, you can really resonate. Executing against your social media strategy. How many people here have a social media strategy? Good, not a lot, right? Well, what I'll tell you is, if you are able to, I mean, that's actually a decent percentage, but if you know your customer, a social media strategy is easy, right? It's much easier because you can hone in on the very few organizations that you really care about. And I would encourage you to talk to Peggy if you want to talk about social media strategies, or there's several folks out there, but excellent way, and it is the way organizations are winning business today. It is one of the easiest ways to develop those relationships. We'll talk a little bit about that. Invest in the customer, build prototypes. There is a tremendous amount of open data out there. If you're doing work at CMS, or you want to do work at CMS today, take the data. Again, you now know that which organization you focus on. You can invest in that organization and feel good about that investment because you know you're hunting in the right places. Part of the reason why people normally don't invest, right, is because you look and you go, how many programs to pay off for this? Well, if you know that's an organization that is buying the way you buy, or buying the stuff that you sell, and the way you sell, you're going to be in great shape. And then investing in competitive intelligence framework. So again, I'm a big data geek. I'm going to talk a little bit about what a CI framework is, and because the reason why is the guys that are winning, they do this really well. And again, anybody, and there's a couple of the folks in here I know that live this and understand the power of it and realize that this is the value, right? So when you talk about the competitive intelligence framework, I'm not going to define what it is for you. You can read up, but the gist of it is having situational awareness of your target. Again, if you're 15 agencies, 20 agencies, whatever organizations, and you're very focused, having an understanding of what is happening around them. Okay, so they just hired a new director from FDA. What was he doing at FDA? What did he care about at FDA? What were the technologies he was focused on? What is his big hot buttons? If you're too focused on what's in front of you all the time, you'll forget what's happening. Or there was an enterprise software solution bought at headquarters. How do I grab that information and use that to my advantage? I know that's going to be cheaper now, right? Maybe that's a better option than what they have now. That's how I can win this business. But if you're constantly focused on the front, if you're constantly focused on the 12, you're going to forget about the 3, 6, and 9. And that's a big challenge. So when we talk about developing a competitive intelligence process, and again, we're very big into competitive intelligence. I'm a huge fan of it. I think it is the ultimate value that the customer gets out of it. If they spend the time, there's huge value in terms of return on investment. But developing a competitive intelligence process or framework is really a process, right? This is lots of people go out and do the CI every once in a while. Hey, let's go do the competitive intelligence and let's figure out what's happening in the space. The problem is it doesn't persist, right? So you don't come back and visit for 6 months. This is about developing a process. And it's going to be different depending upon the size of the organization you're with. But it is saying, okay, what are the tools that we can really take advantage of? And there's several here I mentioned. IT dashboard. How many people here use IT dashboard? Okay. And that's crazy. This is an IT industry, right? I just have very few hands. I mean, this is, and I get that you can get some of this on Bloomberg, but this is out there. It's an authoritative source. Exhibit 300, Exhibit 53s. Here's the funding for the organization. Here's the programs. Here's the project. Here's the contracts. Here's the incumbents. You can get a tremendous amount of insight about what's happening. And this is directly from the government. This is not bastardized in any way. Right? They're required to fill this out. And by the way, there's a regulation out now that's going to actually increase the number of reports that these guys have to do. That's a phenomenal tool. FBSNG, we've already talked about it. I could go on for an hour about it. And Guy Timberlake, I encourage you guys, if you don't have anybody that's familiar with FBS, go talk to Guy, get in on one of his training sessions, and gain an understanding of what you got. That's kept secret. It's horrible. It's a horrible tool. But it is great. That is honest. I'm not talking about chasing solicitations here. But this is a great source of intel in terms of seeing what has that customer done historically, how have they bought, what were the valuation criteria. Again, they're creatures of habit. They're going to buy the same way they did last time. They will switch from time to time, but for the most part, it's great intel. Cal, the new product, 18F, still trying to figure out whether that one's going to be any good, but it's, and this is ability to look at prices. What are people charging across the government for specific contract rates? Good resource. Like I said, it's still a little bit in process, but it's brand new, one worth watching. GAO, BAPIS, if a contract's in trouble, they have to report it, right? Protest contract issues. The information is out there, I guess is the point, and I won't go into each of these, but the point here is that this is valuable information that is free and out there today. And for a small business that maybe doesn't want to spend the X number of $1,000 to get Bloomberg or whatever it may be, it's a great resource. Later in your competitive intelligence process is social media. Your customers are out there. Not all of them, but many of them are out there. They're talking about what they're doing. They're doing from a business standpoint, personal standpoint. It's a phenomenal way to gain insight into what's happening. And yes, Facebook, was a story I heard the other day about if you want to get competitive intelligence, was one of the CEOs from a major IT player was stepping down, and before he even told his employees that he was leaving, he actually released on Facebook that he was leaving his company, right? So the word got out. But the point here is, if you use these tools right, information is out there. You just have to develop that process where you're getting information. Google Alerts, same thing. I don't know how many people here use Google Alerts, but you use Google Alerts, you use everything. So it's great. But yeah, I mean, look, if you're targeted. I'm focused on 14, 15 different organizations. Oh, I care about this program. Set it up. It'll send you alert every time something happens. Right? I care about this individual. You don't even have to go out. It's coming to you, right? Here's this info that's coming to me. Twitter, of course. But again, I think the big thing is to recognize that this is also a means for two-way communication. It is bi-directional. So it's an opportunity for you to engage, send out the white paper, send out your information about your company marketing, engage with whether it's a LinkedIn group, whether it's by Twitter. You can engage in ways that you never could before. And the leaders that are coming up through government today, this is how they interact, right? And these are the rising stars. They're using these sources. So if you're not looking, you're missing out. And companies are doing this. I mean, be clear. Companies that are winning, absolutely involved in this. So what are you trying to get out of a competitive intelligence process? What is the ultimate goal? And I won't go through each of these things because I think there's a number of right intel you can get. But the gist of it is, look, I think everyone would agree that you're going to win more business when you're doing organic business development, right? When you're in there, when you're on the ground, you can get that ground truth. And the reason why is because you can get the data, right? You have the relationships, you have the knowledge, you can, you understand the environment, the technology. The whole point of a CI process is to try to recreate it as closely as you can. You're never going to be able to get it perfectly, but and this is obviously varies up with your sales efforts as well. But it is that intel that allows you to have the conversations with these clients in a very confident way, so you understand what are the moving parts, and you're still not going to have all the data points that you would have if you were doing traditional activities. But it's a big push forward. There was a great quote. I don't know, does anybody have the DoD mobility CIO or event the other day? Did you hear this quote from Congressman? Okay. Great quote, right? My 30-year 30-year plus career in industry has gotten a whole lot less knowledgeable. Now, we can point fingers, and I mean, I think there's lots of reasons for that, right? I mean, if you don't come out and talk about it, then you're not going to. But the point here is still the same, which is, look, yes, government, for a variety of reasons, is probably not as open as it used to be. Some of that's on us, because we protest everything, right? All the lawyers. But the point here is that if you will do your homework, you can easily stand out from the competition. And the companies that win are the ones who do their homework. And it's hard. Let's be clear. I mean, it is work. And if you like research, it's important. So with that, moving on, education. And again, I'm not going to ruin Brian's book because I want you guys to go and buy it. Brian is, again, senior acquisition lead over at CMS. But I think it's chapter, I don't know what chapter it was, Eric, 12, 13, 14. Government and contractor staff are uninformed. But it's a great book that provides good inside perspective. The three kind of takeaways I would say here are: know your FAR. Look, the government is encouraged to meet with industry. Use the FAR. Use it to your advantage. FAR 15.2.1. Bring them opportunities, and this was the suggestion. Bring them products, solutions that save them money and time. Okay? Don't come in and talk about capabilities. You can, but it's not going to get you very far. Bring me something that actually works and solves their issues. And then lastly is, tell them how they can get to you. So again, if you've done your competitive intelligence, you already know how to find. Right? You already know that you use IT70, you use CISP3, or whatever it may be with the organization. You can go in there and minimum you can say, hey, I'm on IT70, or I'm on this, here's how you can get to me. You're solving half the problem. But if you don't have the vehicle, it's also your opportunity to, and again, if you have the competitive intelligence, you can understand that, look, I really want to jobs on the set aside. I know there's a contracting government officer over here who's left 3 in the last year. I'm going to connect you with him, because that will get this deal done, right? It's going to help you push forward. It's hard to break them of their habits. They are creatures of habits, we all are. But again, if you have that competitive intelligence, you can help them push that forward. So, federal health BU resources, here's a bunch. I'll send this deck around, you guys can have. I mean, here's reality. It's not hard to find out the opportunities, right? It's just not. The government does a fantastic job of putting information out about what's going on. It's what you do with that initial forecast. It's what you do with that initial information, right? But it is out there. I'll send it around PHA, MHS, VA, tons of opportunity. I will tell you, we Teacher Exchange launched a magazine today called FedHealthIT.com, or FedHealthIT magazine. You can go to FedHealthIT.com. But again, great resource for intelligence. I encourage you guys to check it out. It's industry moves, who's winning what. It's a little bit of a stuff. There's no cost for it. It's essentially a little bit of what our members get, so you can get a feel for what the teacher itself is receiving. And then lastly, is another resource for you guys is, here's some of the notable federal health social media folks. If you don't have a social media strategy, which is something most of you guys don't, follow these guys. More importantly, follow them to see what they're saying, but follow them to see what other people are saying to them. See how other organizations are engaging with them, because they are. And if you'll pay attention, it might inform how you go about doing your own social media coverage. So, and again, I'll send the slide deck around so you guys have it. I think that's all I have. Thank you guys very much. I'm around. Feel free if you guys have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, David. It's got to be the Google Plus, and Google Alert, because you are always insightful. And every morning, actually, I love reading Teacher Exchange email. The email is basically my coffee. And I often ask myself, how in the world he can get the part and actionable information? So it's got to be Google Alert. Thank you, David, for sharing a lot of good information. I would like to introduce our next speaker, David Davis. David Davis serves as the Director of the Health Data Initiative, or HDI, at the HSS. David's work at the HSS office of the CTO and at the ONC has always been about health data and the use of data to help improve healthcare. The Health Data Initiative is not new. Launched in 2010, it has grown to 1,600 data sets and counting. and I'm sure many of the data sets actually developed by the companies here in this room. I find the data set helpful, but sometimes just a description of the data set helpful for my understanding to support the delivery of my project or the proposal response. So you may find a market for a new app to present the data in a new way. Damon will highlight successful applications by private industry, discuss the future of health data initiatives, and best practices, learn from implementing the government open SBA and NIH big data to knowledge programs. Thank you, Damon.
Give me 1 second, I will get feedback. Apologize for the technical difficulties, folks. Apparently, we can get data out, but we can't get presentations from one laptop to another. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. I don't want to keep you all waiting. I pretty much know what I want to say. So I'm going to go through the slide deck in my mind and try to project an image verbally that I hope you all can associate with. So once again, my name is Damon Davis, and I represent the Chief Technology Officer's Office at HHS, otherwise known as the HHS Idea Lab. And what the Idea Lab is focused on is innovation, design, entrepreneurship, and action, therefore the acronym IDEA. And what we're trying to do is innovate in the ways that government does the business of government. We're trying to find new and unique ways to deliver data to various users, to collect data from our various entities across the department, and to also attempt to do different types of innovative practices across HHS. And by that I mean literally the people who are sitting at their desk every single day doing their job over and over again. We are attempting to offer them opportunities to try to experiment on how to make that job different and better, more efficient, more cost effective. So the Idea Lab is focused on innovation across HHS and has been widely heralded as an innovation that should be spread across other departments in government. But I'm here to talk to you today more about the Health Data Initiative. And so as we think about HHS writ large as a departmental entity, it is comprised of many large names that you already know: National Institutes of Health, Food and Drug Administration, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, names that have their own identity, but those are all within the umbrella of HHS. And so when you look at a health data initiative across those major entities, you can imagine that there are tons and tons of data sets that come out from our various programs and initiatives, contracts, and research activities. So what we try to do is we catalog those data sets that we make available on our platform, healthdata.gov, which we recently just re-released in its beta form with a couple of different goals. The first of which was that healthdata.gov was sort of an old technology by internet standards. Unfortunately, there are not infinite numbers of dollars to set up, the most robust platform every time new technology comes out. So we had to take some time, reevaluate what it was that we were trying to deliver on the platform, and we realized that usability, sort and search, actual visualization of the data, the ability to preview the data and not necessarily have to download it to your laptop or to your device or to your processing platform was going to be a significant leap forward in helping people to efficiently navigate the platform. Another thing that we try to accomplish is some better data quality, actually looking at the data sets that we're producing and try to produce something that is more efficient and effective for the uses that you may have in the various industries that we've already talked about. So healthdata.gov is out, it's in beta form. We've got the data API catalog coming out a little bit later this summer. I encourage you to kick around in there and find some of the data sets that might be useful for your various entrepreneurial business endeavors. There are valuable data sets in there from all kinds of elements of research, as I've said, but also I want to highlight that some of the entities within HHS that sort of go in lesser known circles, Administration for Children and Families, they've got a ton of interesting data sets and are actually the social services component of HHS. So they're dealing with things like assistance for needy families. They're dealing with issues like unaccompanied minors coming across our borders. They are an integral part of our healthcare system because often the decision that an individual has to make, especially in some circles that we probably are not in, some in underserved communities, is how do I make a decision between going from the doctor's office, where I was just told I need to fill a prescription, to deciding whether I'm going to keep the lights on at home or buy the food for the family or what have you. And you can see that if I have to divert my attention towards the needs of my family, that it is very challenging to actually think about my own personal medical needs by virtue of this prescription that I have in my hand that I should be going to fulfill. So there's social services data out there that are very, very important for helping healthcare writ large be more effective by relieving some of the burdens that people have in their everyday lives in order to make some of the decisions that will affect their own medical care. I would love to tell you a little bit more about some of the data sets that are coming out of the department more specifically. One of the things Nam mentioned was OpenFDA. OpenFDA is a relatively new endeavor where the department, the Food and Drug Administration, basically recognized that they were constantly being asked for the same types of data sets over and over and over again. And the opportunity then was for them to make those data sets openly and freely available for people to utilize, not for clinical insights, but just for basic insights into what it is that is happening with food recalls, drug recalls, device adverse events. You know, many of us know somebody who has maybe a heart monitor or something like that. Those devices every once in a while have a challenge, a problem, and those devices are required to be reported into the FDA, and that's valuable information back to the healthcare system as to what's transpiring with those devices, as well as maybe some of the drugs that are also maybe being recalled or have issues. So open.fda.gov is the site that you can go to for APIs directly into some of these valuable data sets about what FDA makes available. I'll tell you quickly about a use case for some of that data. I like to sort of point out the industry-related ones, but this one is actually supported by another government entity and then out to industry. So OpenFDA is utilized by an application called Pillbox, where Pillbox is basically taking images of every single pill they can possibly get their hands on and attaching those images to the actual information about the drug, so that you now can see you've got a robust resource of drug information that you can now marry out to other information in healthcare. So you can imagine how something like information from Medline Plus and NLM, Pillbox with OpenFDA APIs could be linked out to all kinds of innovative, creative folks who are going to be engaged in projects in large hospital systems, online medical information products, etc. So this is a use case where National Library of Medicine has set up Pillbox to use OpenFDA data, and that data is then forwarded out for further innovation where those APIs into Pillbox as well. Another example of some of the data out of HHS is from Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. They have gone leaps and bounds beyond where they previously were in terms of their openness and utilization of data. They're actually standing up a very robust set of data scientists, data stewards, who are focused on Medicare and Medicaid claims data, which is incredibly valuable for all kinds of interesting positive disruptions in healthcare. Some of which could be related to, say, fraud, waste, and abuse. So there's a company that I just met with the other day, whose name escapes me right now, and the slide is not flashing in my mind. But this organization has taken the claims data and very effectively started to pull out some of the patterns of what it is that providers are charging for across healthcare. And you can then start to see some of their utilization in IT, some of their prescribing patterns, some of their general referring patterns. And then it can be very effective for understanding where it is that quality is or is not implemented in the healthcare system. So for example, if a physician over here is constantly referring to a physician over there, you might actually be able to discover that one, they went to the same university, but two, these referrals are leading to extremely high quality in terms of outcomes for the patients that go from this physician to that follow-up over here. Conversely, you could also potentially discover that there's something fraudulent on this side of the equation, where this individual who's in a specific specialty is actually charging significantly more than the bar for other specialists in his same cohort, maybe in this state, across the nation, what have you. So the CMS data is becoming incredibly valuable for all kinds of innovation and positive disruption, as I've said. They have what they refer to as a virtual research data center. So in CMS's VRDC, you cannot actually take the claims data out. It has identifiable information about some vulnerable populations, people over 65 years of age, Medicaid information with regard to those who are underserved and are potentially impoverished. So you don't want to release that data out with identifiable information on it, but you do want to invite people into a secure place where they can actually start to do analytics on a cohort of people that they are trying to identify a solution for. So the virtual research data center is something CMS has stood up. They also have a data navigator, which is a catalog of their own CMS data sets, incredibly valuable for all kinds of things in healthcare. And that data navigator actually federates into healthdata.gov, and that federates up to data.gov, which is the comprehensive list of data sets across all agencies in government. So you can see we're trying to create connectivity for places for you to find these data sets. I want to tell you one more about Administration for Children and Families. As I said, there are some folks out there who are very much in need of solutions that meet them where they are. They are single moms and dads who are trying to manage their job, they're trying to manage their family needs, and they also need to get to their medical appointments. And so matching them up with things like transportation to those appointments that may be made at after hours times that fits with their schedule are incredible things to have, let alone what is the location of the actual facility that they're trying to get to. So you can see how ride matching, assistance for needy families, and all of those kinds of things can come together in support of a needy family. There's an organization called Friendly that is using IBM Watson. They're using ACF data, and they're trying to match up the clinical needs in some of Detroit's large healthcare systems with the actual population needs at the ground level, so that they can really start to make that connectivity and get some of our neediest neighbors to the care that they actually need. I want to tell you a little bit more about the Idea Lab too, because I think it's important to sort of shine a light on the examples of what it is that we're trying to accomplish within the department. I'll tell you about one of our past innovation activities, and then I'll tell you about something that's going on currently with regard to our open data initiative. So when I talk about our innovation pathways, one of the things that we sometimes like to do is, well, recognize that we don't have all of the expertise inside of government, but then recognize that you all have a lot of it, and we would like to invite that expertise into government to solve some of our most critical problems. And a classic example of that is that HHS manages the organ donation and transplantation system across America. And unfortunately, that system, every once in a while, would have a problem. And you can imagine that a small problem in an important system like that can have huge ramifications for the patient who is attempting to get an organ donation into their own body for their own better health. And so in recognition of this problem really needing solving, the Human Resources and Services Administration, HRSA, got an entrepreneur in residence to come into HHS to help solve the problems of getting an organ from one end of the country to the other at the right time, to the right person in a timely fashion. And lo and behold, the individual that they brought in for that particular project was from the United Parcel Service, one of the global leaders in logistics and managing point-to-point delivery. So that's a really sort of easy example to envision. I want to pivot now to an open data example of an entrepreneur in residence that we have in place right now. The guy's name is David Portnoy. He comes from Chicago. And David is sort of a serial entrepreneur. He's been using HHS data for quite a while. And what we did was we were sort of sitting around thinking about how it was that we could make our data better. And we wanted a data entrepreneur to come in and assist us with that. And our initial assumption was that we were going to actually create linkages between some of our most valuable data sets. How is it that we can provide a better value by providing a data set or two that were linked together and then have a new product for delivery to the public? But what David realized as he was sort of traversing the healthcare system at HHS and the data ecosystem was that what we really didn't have was a way to determine the demand for our data, let alone the value back to those who are requesting that data. So what David decided to do was create something called demand-driven open data. And you can see that at ddod.us. And basically what demand-driven open data is an opportunity for folks to actually reach out to HHS and say, here's what I need from your data. And it may be that I've been to healthdata.gov and I don't see any data sets related to what I'm actually interested in. Can you put this kind of data up from ACF, HRSA, SAMHSA, CDC? Or, I already see this data out there. My problem is it's only in a CSV. It's only in a text file. I needed it in API because here's the business case for the problem I'm trying to solve, and that would be incredibly valuable for me. So that then gives us an opportunity to put some weight on that request. The problem that you're trying to solve, the business need that you've identified, allows us to then help you to deliver value back by virtue of delivering that data back. So ddod.us is actually collecting use cases for those who are interested in deeper utilization of HHS data in a demand-driven approach to trying to accumulate that data. So we're going to continue to traverse the department, and I will talk to all of my colleagues that I can, looking for more and more and more data sets. But I also need to hear from industry, from small business, entrepreneurs, researchers, those in politics, those in the media, to say, here's what I'm interested in out of your data. Can you deliver that for me? And here's the value that I think it will deliver by delivering that back to me. So I think I'll close there. I have no idea what was on my last slide, except for Idea Lab. But I would be very interested in some questions from you all as to what kinds of industries you're in, what kinds of opportunities you see in the data. Tell me anything you're interested in. I'm happy to take questions if we have time. Great. Don't be shy, I wasn't that good. Go.
I'd like to have a little more technical question. You mentioned that healthdata.gov, the APIs will be coming later this summer. Then you mentioned OpenFDA, which I know has beta APIs.
Yes.
Does healthdata.gov have beta APIs or no APIs at all right now?
We don't. What we would have is a catalog API, and we don't have it up right now. So what we did recently was, in recognition of June's Health Data Palooza, which is a massive gathering of those using health data by the Health Data Consortium, in recognition of the line in the sand on June 3rd that we needed to have a new healthdata.gov up by then, we put out what we sort of refer to inside as the minimum viable product. So we stripped down everything in order to just port the catalog over, get some basic functionality in place, and then actually put up some of the new interesting functionality like the ability to preview data sets. So the catalog API is going to be coming live later in the summer. I'm working through multiple different tickets, user issues, and things like that to try to deliver the next set of functionality, but that's on our agenda.
Are you guys doing that internally or leaking out?
We're doing that internally right now, but we're federating our catalog to data.gov, and we're constantly consulting with 18F and OSTP about what our requirements are for open data. There's some common core metadata standards that we continue to evolve as agencies, and we have to continue to implement those things. They're always looking for the stories and use cases of who is using departmental data and for what. Because one of the challenges that we have in government is an inability to actually put a number next to our open data efforts, right? If we're constantly putting data out and we're seeing lots of entrepreneurial endeavors and lots of, public reporting in the press and things like that, it's very, very hard to sort of figure out how this data set turned into this product in the market, or this data set turned into these stories over here, or what have you. So we're sort of constantly looking for those stories and cultivating them, reporting some of the super interesting ones to OSTP, but also inviting folks to blog about what it is that they're using the data for, because that can be so valuable for someone else's creativity to actually say, well, if they're using this data for this, I bet I could use that data for my thing. And so part of my job and some of my colleagues is to sort of inspiring those who are outside of government to use the data, because it's free. It's freely available, it's easy to download in most cases, and it can be incredibly valuable for so many different things. So,
do you have any initiatives with some of the other agencies that have open data? I'm thinking in particular about like weather. NOAA has an open data source. Is there any way that you're communicating with them about how you connect health statistics, weather statistics?
yeah, there's a lot of interesting mashups that are happening. They're not necessarily formal government-to-government things, and I think that's part of the beauty of having open data out for everybody to see is there's so many intelligent people who are doing, really nuanced things in industry that they are going to see the mashup of weather data to health to, urban sprawl and urban planning. You know what I mean? And we could sit around and create all kinds of interesting things, but I think there's so many more people across the American public who have all kinds of interesting ideas. We've actually got a challenge out right now. The Obesity Data Challenge is one that actually focuses on that kind of thing. And I would love for you all to think of some of the innovators that you know that are focused on obesity-related issues. Have them go to challenge.gov and check out the Obesity Data Challenge, because it speaks to that very thing. We're interested in innovations that have at least one publicly available data set, so something you can find on healthdata.gov, and then anything else that is going to be supportive of providers having a conversation with their patients about interventions they can make in their own lives that will help them combat obesity. So those could be things like obesity rates in the state of Maryland, specifically for Montgomery County, and here's all the parks that are open for outdoor exercise, all of the farmers markets across Maryland, and name the other things. So you can see how those are data sets from disparate categories. So I would encourage you to check out the Obesity Data Challenge and see if you have an app or a service that might be a solution for some problem in obesity. We would love to have you have a submission to the challenge. Sir?
Do the data sets that you're talking about, are they primarily Medicare data, or are you including Medicaid as well? Because that would be interesting to see the, sort of the longitudinal view.
Yeah, there's a huge push for more Medicaid data. One of the problems that I understand that comes from Medicaid data is it's for state grants, it's out of state grants, and it is not necessarily in sort of all the same formats. And again, there's the identifiability issues that coincide with releasing Medicaid data. So predominantly, Medicare data is the main focus right now, but there's a concerted effort to try to find ways to bring higher quality to Medicaid data, figure out the ways that you can aggregate Medicaid data across multiple different states in order to create some kind of a publicly available use file that would be, as you know, so valuable for all kinds of interesting insights. Yes, ma'am.
Could you talk a little bit about the precision medicine initiative announced by the White House and how you guys might be involved in data from that perspective?
Yeah, precision medicine is going to be really interesting. I've not had an opportunity to sort of dig deeply into it, but just for those around there, the idea is basically to try to find ways to give the most pointed and directed medical service to an individual based on things like their own heredity and DNA and, you name the input. It therefore is not necessarily an open data initiative right now because I think it's more focused on accumulating a wide array of data sets, a wide array of individuals who would contribute their own data to this large cohort for research. So unfortunately, I'm not very well versed, but I'd be happy to connect you with some folks inside of HHS to talk more about precision medicine. Ma'am,
Are you
and then
collecting,
sorry, go ahead, ma'am.
are you collecting genomics data or biometrics for profiling purposes or trends, like to help with medicine?
Yeah, you know, collecting sounds really scary when you talk about the government doing it. So the answer is no, we're not collecting that stuff. But what we are doing is having conversations with those who are setting up the resource area where I could contribute my data, right? So many of us have done, you know, the online DNA test or something like that. And there are many, many sort of patients and consumers and advocates who have a disease or a state that they would never want anyone else to suffer from. And therefore, they are very, very interested in contributing their own data to say, please solve this problem so that nobody has to suffer from this anymore. So that's not something that government is necessarily setting up to do as much as looking to partner with those who are, such that there could be a team up and a mashup of the data across government available data and those who have contributed their own data voluntarily. Yes, sir.
Bob Connors at NEOM IT, just on the precision medicine, one of the big private companies is 23andMe, for those that are interested. But my question is about publicly available data sets that might help prevent fraud detection. It's a big thing. It seems with all this data out there, we should be able to do a better job with Medicare and Medicaid fraud detection. A lot of it involves identity management, people masquerading as others, and changing company names. Any comments on that?
Yeah, there's the masquerading piece, but there's also the just, you know, internal ability to detect outliers in charges, like the example I gave before. You know, the doctor who's making the referral, that could be a very quality referral, or the individual who is the specialist could be, you know, just outside of or well outside of the bounds of what that specialty normally charges for a specific patient panel or what have you. There's also internal processes that need to be more robust in order to detect those things more quickly. So there's a Center for Program Integrity at CMS. CPI is very focused on those kinds of things. How is it that we can internally detect those things? How is it that we can take geographic and location data and actually be able to plot where these places say that they are, so that we can have a better determination as to whether the same name appears twice on the same zip code and one is like in an industrial park, right? So how do you start to make some of this intelligent determinations as to what an outlier might look like? But similarly, I think we're focused very much on finding those who are fraudulent. And I heard somebody say something very interesting that I never really contemplated, which was in trying to find those who are fraudulent, they had this company who escapes me, had a project to basically try to determine fraud. They were looking for all these different outliers, and they kept throwing data at it, and it just kept getting worse. They were not finding anything. And what they realized was they were trying to model bad behavior, when in fact they had not established a baseline for what good behavior was. So once they established a baseline for good behavior, all the outliers popped out, because they now understood what was within the threshold. So I think it's intelligent approaches like that that are going to be really beneficial going forward. But there's a whole robust set of activities that are going to support that. Yes, sir, Pat.
We have a Area-enabled quality care initiative, a clinical decision app that we've developed. We're in the second phase of testing with the University of North Carolina. We think it has potential at HHS. What is the best way to introduce that to you guys?
So who is the agency that you think would be most interested in knowing that? You'll forgive me for not being familiar with perinatal.
That's what we're not quite sure of.
Okay, so shoot me an email. It's damon.davis@hhs.gov. Send me like 2 paragraphs as to what the thing is that you do and what the sort of intervention is. I think this is interesting because Sometimes there's a misconception that the government is the place to sell your stuff. We'd love to be aware of these things because we can make connections for you oftentimes. But I don't know, I could be ignorant, but I don't know if that is something that would be sort of on the shopping list. So shoot me an email. I'd love to know more about what it is that you're working on, and I can help you to connect with an agency in the department that would at least want to know what it is that you're working on and help you to get your results out there or what have you. Okay? Is that it? We got time? Anybody else? Well, then why don't we get you guys ahead of schedule? Thank you all very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, David. I do that.
You're right.
Actually, that's a long story and a lot of opportunity for innovation. Even though you may not speak the exact word, I hear so many keywords. Agility, do something, let's say, adaptability, someone uses it and, like it or not, usability, and innovation. And as federal healthcare executive and leading professional, we can see opportunities everywhere to innovate. So thank you very much, Damon, to give us that whole set of perspective as well. We are going to have a 15-minute break. I hope that you enjoyed the session so far. Please return to your seat sharp for a very informative session, okay? 10:25. Thank you.
And I believe we have snacks and beverages down the hallway.
That's the
Let's say, for instance, when we say connected to the open data, I was thinking, you know, we look at the IAC and the key thing to make sure that the right now
please, feel free to help yourself. It's always like a reunion, familiar face, hug, talk. That's right. So thank you everyone again. We're going to have a very informative, exciting discussion, and I gratefully would like to introduce our panelists. And Don Doe. Don Doe is the Director of Information Technology Contract Group within the Office of Acquisition and Grants Management, or ATM, at the CMS. Don is responsible for the award and administration of all CMS information system maintenance, testing, data center operations, and support of the Medicare, Medicaid, and health insurance marketplace program. As we prepare for the event, Don actually wanted to hear about IAC, Small Business Alliance interest. He wants to learn what information is helpful to us, to you all. For companies with or without footprint within CMS, with or without footprint within CMS. Understanding the CMS IT contracting challenges and needs will help business community make better decisions, which in turn help the government even more. So, the next speaker, John Booth. John is the Director of the Web and New Media Group in the CMS Office of Communication. In this position, John oversees CMS public website programs, a lot of it, which include the healthcare.gov, medicare.gov, CMS.gov, medicaid.gov, insurekitnow.gov, and other websites. Wow. 20 years, right, John? 20 years. For years, John has been a leader that helps make CMS one of the few agencies that was ahead of the pack that helps make CMS one of, in providing online self-services for Medicare beneficiaries and caregivers, no matter what, how they want to get it, but it also set a baseline for reuse of desired tools and methods for other CMS web projects. Recently, John shared key innovations CMS used leading up to the successful 2015 open enrollment. That's a huge task. And John allowed us to look into the next wave of innovation planned for the site. You will find today's discussion fascinating and wonder how you could actually help the government more to apply and replicate those best practices somewhere else. Thank you, John. I would like to introduce George Linares. George is the Chief Technology Officer for CMS. As CTO, George serves as one of the agency principal officials responsible for information technology at CMS in the following areas: system architecture, system security, tools, platforms, and network. George advocates for the optimization of CMS IT investment and information management to maintain cost-effective services. And you will appreciate this information. This is new. In his CTO role, George makes this a priority to further engage and enable staff by promoting technology infusion opportunities through a number of parallel initiatives, which includes industry outreach and internal forums to share emerging technologies. Keyword again, emerging technologies. He also cares deeply about his staff, professional development, he is working to establish a continuous technical development program for his staff. Thank you for it. One last item. Industry, today, we will not just listen, we actually have a few questions for you, right? So hope that we got great input from you in the spirit of innovation and collaboration with the government. So we will have 3 questions during the discussion, and I will ask, and hopefully you can briefly help us respond to those questions. Okay. Thank you very much, and the discussion starts. So I appreciate that you come here today, right? And we know that, in the spirit of collaboration with the government, industry love to hear the business opportunities at CMS. But when we hear about the business opportunities, we actually want to solve problems for you all, right? So we want to hear the challenges that you have. So if you could share your perspective on those areas, that would be really helpful.
I can start. But before I answer that question, I guess I want to ask a couple questions of the audience. So how many folks here are currently doing business with CMS? I see a lot of familiar faces, so quite a lot. And then if I could also ask, how many of you are with small businesses? Quite a lot of those. How about any hub zones? We need hub zones. Great, great, we're looking for you. I want to kick off a little bit with about CMS, some statistics about CMS, and then talk a little bit about, I think we have some great opportunities coming up for the contractor community to be a part of CMS's requirements in the future. If we look back last year, CMS did about $10 billion in contract work for the entire agency. Within that, we have about 600 contractors and probably about 1,200 active contracts going on. If you're familiar with CMS, our organizational structure, we're made up of centers and offices, and mostly within the Office of Acquisition and Grants Management, we focus on supporting a particular customer, so a particular center or a particular office. So one of the exceptions that we established a few years ago was to consolidate their IT contracting into a single group, and so that's the area that I have responsibility for. Within CMS, our IT is somewhat decentralized, so while much of the IT work is done in the Office of Technology Services, there's quite a bit of IT spread throughout the other centers and offices. So John Booth's here from the Office of Communication. He has extensive IT within his group, and there's others throughout CMS, whether it's the Center for Program Integrity, the Center for Medicare, the Center for Quality Assurance. So IT spread out, and we've attempted to consolidate our IT contracting together. One of the things I often recommend to contractors who want to do business with CMS is that you really need to understand the business that CMS is conducting. We're not just looking for people with capability statements, but we want people who understand the challenges that CMS faces, the programs that we manage, and come with solutions. One good way kind of to understand CMS that we recommend to people is there's, sometimes you have to follow the money. So a lot of times if you look at the CMS budget, you find a lot about what CMS is doing. And there's a document out there about where we justify the estimates for appropriations. So if you kind of search for that document, you find a lot of, I think, really important information about what's coming up in the future budget for CMS and what are some of the important priorities and projects that might be coming down the pipe. So I know a lot of people here are interested in the health sector. Obviously, it's an emerging sector with a lot of interest. There's a lot of competition in the health sector, but again, we're looking for companies that understand CMS. A lot of times that may mean for a small business that you might have to team initially to gain some experience, gain some knowledge, gain some understanding of the interconnection of our systems and how our programs are run and managed. And I think that gives a lot of good experience then to continue to grow. We've been very successful with small businesses at CMS. For many of you who know, we had an IDIQ, Enterprise Systems Development, and basically all of the small businesses within that got a lot of work. Many of them grew in size, many of them are no longer small businesses today. So we're continuing to look for new and emerging small businesses that can help us in solving their problems. Just wanted to touch on a couple other points here. A lot of what we do for IT contracting at CMS is, and I think we're not uncommon in this area throughout the government, IT is purchased usually through some type of a streamlined procurement path. So at CMS we have 2 large IDIQs, and we're getting ready to recompete one of those for an opportunity called Spark. And I'll address that in a little bit more detail. But we have a virtual data centers IDIQ with a set of companies that basically manage much of their infrastructure and data center requirements. And as I said, we had our enterprise systems development contract for the IT development and IT lifecycle support services that are needed. We have recently also looked for other opportunities, so we look at the government-wide acquisition contracts that may be out there, whether it's GSA Alliant, CIO SB3, GSA 88 Stars. Sometimes we may actually move to GSA IT Schedule 70 to try to fulfill our needs. One of the challenges that we face in IT contracting is continuing to try to accelerate the time to contract. So trying to shorten those cycle times, and so the use of some type of a streamlined vehicle like an agency-specific IDIQ or a GWAC is obviously the preferred method for us to procure our needs and our services that we require. So going into a little bit about some opportunities at CMS. So we're real excited that we've gotten the authorization to do an agency-specific IDIQ called Spark, Strategic Partners Acquisition Readiness Contract. And we're anticipating that the final RFP for that will be released by the end of the month. And so we had a lot of interest in Spark. We had an industry day for Spark not too long ago. We received a lot of feedback and input from the industry, and we very much appreciate that. We've taken a lot of that input to try to drive improvements into our RFP. And so we're really excited about embarking on the opportunity for Spark. Spark for us will be a 10-year, $25 billion IDIQ opportunity. We project from looking at our historical records on work that we've done that we'll be doing anywhere from 20 to 25 task orders under Spark each year. We've worked real closely with the Small Business Office and the OSDBU office at the department to work in a very robust way of evaluating each of their requirements to determine whether or not the work should be set aside for small businesses. Spark will basically be set up with a small business pool and a large business pool. One of the uniquenesses, though, is that the small businesses will be able to compete for anything that's viewed as unrestricted. So we'll either be restricting it for small business, or it will be unrestricted, and all owners will have an opportunity to compete for the work. We're very hopeful that we'll be able to get a significant set of small businesses such that we can fill each of the socioeconomic small business categories and potentially do set-asides then within the small business socioeconomic categories as well. So again, it's a very exciting opportunity for us to bring in new contractors. The big emphasis for us is on getting contractors that are the best of the best, and looking for a lot of innovation, a lot of ability to collaborate. One of the uniquenesses at CMS is how our systems interconnect and how our services intertwine, and so we need contractors that are able to collaborate with other contractors as well. Spark gives us a really unique opportunity to comply with some of the new legislative requirements of FITARA, and we're hopeful that Spark, as I said, will help us have clear transparency and visibility into all of our IT purchases and help in making sure we don't have duplication of services across the agency. So basically, we're looking for the best of the best. We're looking for flexibility, contractors with agility. We need people that understand their needs. We're looking for things that will be driven by innovation, collaboration, and strong cybersecurity, as I said. So that's a little bit about the opportunity that we have coming up for Spark. We also have a couple very, very significant procurements coming up that we'll be releasing in the fourth quarter of this year for award, the early part of next fiscal year, and then a couple that will come out in the second quarter of FY 2016. I just wanted to highlight a few of those for people who understand CMS's work right now. We have 4 fairly significant procurements coming out soon this fiscal year for the fourth quarter. Something called PAYCOS, the Provider Enrollment Chain and Ownership System. We'll be releasing a RFP for that. We have a requirement coming up for end-stage renal disease quality reporting system. We also have an account data processing and pricing system coming up this fourth quarter. And then we'll also be doing a competitive procurement for the DME claims processing system, work at CMS. And then later, probably somewhere around the second quarter of FY 16, we'll have a couple opportunities coming up from the Data Services Hub that supports the marketplace. And we'll also be doing some competition for our work around information security and support services at CMS. So some significant opportunities coming up. Spark is, I think, a tremendous opportunity for the contracting community to get an opportunity to be part of CMS and the things that are going forward in the future. To quote Dave Nelson at the Industry Day, I mean, we're basically at the threshold where we're transforming the way healthcare is provided in the country, so it's a very interesting time, lots of interesting things going on. And, so we're happy to be moving forward with their Spark IAQ. I think the last thing you asked me about, I'm going to wrap this up, was about some challenges. I just wanted to hit a couple of the key challenges that we're facing right now in IT contracting at CMS. I think John's going to talk a little bit about this from how he's been dealing with this, but one of the key challenges we're facing is trying to move to agile development. And so there's lots of things happening right now at CMS. We're working in collaboration with the U.S. Digital Services in some instances, and also with the GSA 18F organization in some instances to get their assistance in moving us to a more agile capability. But even though we're moving and we're making strides, there's still improvement to do, particularly related to the contracting aspects. So, when I talk about the challenges with Agile, I think it's really important that we align our contract structure to the Agile delivery model. So, making sure that we're doing things in smaller modules, that we're doing more statement of objective types of requirements with product vision and product roadmaps, that we clearly define our acceptance criteria within our contracts, and basically the time to task that need to be completed for the effort to be considered done. The other challenge, the next challenge I think we have at CMS is trying to come up with ways to best incentivize our contractors to achieve success. So as we move to a more agile environment, some people think that you should contract for that fixed price. Some people think that the T&M model is a good contract type. I tell you my personal preference, I think T&M is the right way to go initially, because I think we have a lot of challenges in defining and making something fixed price. But if you get into a T&M environment, a lot of times there's concern that the T&M doesn't really incentivize contractors. So how can we build in incentives, whether that's incentives for continued work, incentive measures, performance incentives. So those are some of the things we're grappling with and challenges and trying to make sure we properly incentivize our contractors to achieve success. As I mentioned earlier, we're always striving to shorten the acquisition cycle time, but it seems like we always get more and more requirements to do more governance and more reviews, and so Qatar's placed kind of another layer of reviews on us to get approvals before some of our IT procurements, and so we're continually trying to streamline and get the contracts awarded faster, so that's an ongoing challenge. And then the last challenge that I think I'll hit is we're looking to use more innovative procurement methods to select the best contractor to do our work. So There's lots of things out there currently. As I said, we're working with some of the 18F folks and the U.S. Digital Services Office. At the department, we have some people that have done some things to the Idea Lab on some innovative approaches. When we reach out to our customer components in CMS, a lot of components want to, I use the term test drive before they buy it kind of approach. So there's lots of talk about having prototypes or other ways to kind of evaluate somebody's ability to perform our work. I view a challenge in that, though, in that how do we make sure that whatever we lay out as a prototype is representative of the work that needs to be done to be successful on the project. So a lot of our systems, I believe, are very complex, very detailed systems, and so can you really get a prototype that's representative of the work that will be needed to be successful with that? So we're working through some of those. I know there's been some procurements done through HHS where you get prototypes back, and then they go through a multi-phase approach, and they get the prototypes back after they select a few companies, and then they select off the prototypes who will be the best contractor. There's lots of interest in that in CMS, but finding the right projects and finding ways to make that be successful for us. But we're looking for other ways to do things. Sometimes we may not be getting a full written proposal like in the past, but maybe there's more reliance on, in some cases, an oral presentation, demonstrations, or prototypes. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. Thank you very much. Actually, I really appreciate the information that you shared in terms of not only that information helped us to understand CMS challenges and bid on the work and win the work, but actually to deliver successfully as well. And we talked about how we have systems being connected and require a lot of collaboration and agility. So that's the thing that the industry always wants to strive for. We appreciate the incentives, discussion that you talked about, so definitely every one of us, I guess. I do want to open the floor for a couple questions so that we can ask anything related to, sport and other opportunities about the
Hi, Don. It's Elias from Rely Group. So we are an ADA and a hub zone. We're currently working at CMS on pretty much every building at CMS. My question for this part, do we need to select the swim lane or for the small business pool that I'm only submitting the proposal as a hub zone instead of an ADA? Or how are you taking a proposal that we have multiple certifications?
It's not a separate proposal for each, what you call swim lane, and each socioeconomic category. So if you propose as a contractor, you happen to have, you might be a 8A, a hub zone as well, you would be in both of those swim lanes automatically. So there's no need to submit 2 proposals or 3 proposals for the different categories that you cover under. So it would be a single response.
Thank you.
Hi, we've heard you during Industry Day, and now CMS is looking for innovative, collaborative companies. The draft RFP structure seemed to be a little more backwards looking and state your experience delivering systems in a similar environment and so forth. Do you envision there to be in the final RFP a technical understanding and approach type section or requirements where we can be a little more forward-looking and present those type of capabilities?
I know we're continuing to look at driving improvements into the RFP, so there's a balance, I think, that we're trying to strike between understanding, having companies that understand us and understand the health industry. One of our selling points for having our own IDIQ is that we think that the business that we conduct is unique. So running Medicare, Medicaid in the marketplace is a unique business line. And so we don't, not only do we need companies that have IT expertise, but we're looking for kind of that blend of those companies that have IT expertise and also have experience, within the health space, and particularly within the product lines and the programs that we run. So it's kind of, we're trying to strike the balance between, one, we want new and innovative thoughts, but then we also need people that understand us. We need people that understand, we get in some of these other technical discussions today, that understand the CMS environment and how the systems interact in the environment. We run into challenges if a company proposes a solution to us, but yet it doesn't work within the way our systems are set up and the way the systems interconnect and the technology stacks that we're using. So we're trying to have a balance on that. But yes, I'm hopeful that we'll have a way that companies can demonstrate what they bring to the table from the standpoint of innovation and collaboration.
Casey helped me pick the individual, so that can be bad.
I'm Mike Carrier with Ventec Solutions. You went through pretty quickly. My phone's weren't able to keep up with the typing here. The 4 procurements coming out in Q4 and 2 coming out in Q2. Could you go through them again for us, please?
Sure. So we're going to have 4 systems here in the fourth quarter that we'll be doing RFPs for. The first one is Paycos, the provider enrollment chain and ownership system. The second is their ESRP quality reporting system. Third was the counter data processing and pricing system. And the last one is their DME claims processing system. And then in the somewhere around the second quarter of FY16, we have our data services hub that supports the marketplace, and we have information security support services we're supporting the CISO. So one of the things I didn't mention is that we're in the process now of gathering and kind of doing our planning, we call it acquisition forecasting for FY16, and we'll be posting that information on our CMS public-facing site. There's on that site, there's a CMS contracting with CMS site, and there's a link to usually where you can get to our opportunities. So I know that document right today is a little bit outdated because it was closer to the earlier part of the fiscal year when we posted our requirements. So we're currently gathering our forecast and we'll be posting that, so you can keep an eye out for our forecast and our opportunities coming up in 16. There's a lot more than this, but if I may hit the highlights of the things.
Marcia DeFalco with Accenture. I have a couple of, one question and a comment. Don, you had mentioned that you want to incent companies for success and looking at performance measures. You mentioned you wanted to do time and materials first. You know, CMS typically does cost plus and has on most of the task orders on ESD. How do you see going forward blending that way of making companies more successful, bringing in more innovation, maybe saving CMS more money by the way you procure those task orders?
So I think I want to correct you first off. I didn't say T&M was our first preference. So I mentioned that in the context of agile development. So if you, if you hear people talk about setting up agile development requirements, there seems to be kind of a back and forth discussion about can you fix price that, or can you, or is it best to be done in a time and material situation? But you're very correct that CMS actually has a preference for cost reimbursable contracts, particularly award fee. That's not conducive to everything though, because award fee, there's an administrative burden on the agency to manage and run an award fee type contract. So particularly if we're doing these smaller modules and sprints in an agile fashion, it may not be conducive to an award fee, but we like the award fee because we feel that's been a very good incentive tool for us to be able to use. But yeah, so I don't think we're moving to T&M. For me, the other challenge is I think we're moving a lot more of our work to fixed price if we're in more of an O&M or a steady state situation. So these are contracts, we need to break them into some form of a hybrid, which would put a bit of a fixed price piece to it, and then maybe some other more flexibly priced arrangement, whether that be T&M or cost reimbursable. for that type of work that's not as well defined, but trying to move some of our O&M projects into having a steady state area for here's what we're doing currently for O&M. So that's what I see. But the other part is incentivizing, I think, around more of the newer projects, or if you're in development, how do you incentivize companies? And so we're trying to figure that out. What's the right way? I think ultimately it should be through performance incentives personally, but if we have challenges and making sure we come up with the right incentives and that we're incentivizing the right things, and we're going to be rewarded for the right things.
And I know that in John's area, in the Office of Communications, you have a procurement, it's time and materials, and then in the out years, it's firm fixed price. So you have to be moving in that direction.
Correct.
The other comment I wanted to make is I know that you have, CMS has utilized the HHS Entrepreneur Program. Can you comment on whether or not you'd be using that more extensively? You know, you're trying to get, use the Idea Lab, work towards innovation. I know there's a challenge in terms of taking those prototypes or those models or those solutions and scaling them and applying them at CMS because, you are unique. You have complications and interconnections between a lot of different systems.
Sure, and I'm going to maybe get into a little bit of this when I talk about Agile, but I think one of the things that we've done successfully, this may not apply to all projects, but some of the work that my team did on healthcare.gov, we sort of did 3 projects, and we stepped up the level of complexity there. So I think finding a way to sort of start small and with limited impact, these weren't prototypes, but so the first project that my team worked on in the fall of 2013, was a window shopping system. That was one of the features that the site didn't have when it launched. And there were a lot of people sort of going into the system to get the pricing information. And so we said we could relieve some pressure on the system by building a standalone window shopping tool. So we had a small team that went off and built that in a couple of weeks, launched it. It had the intended effect of drawing some traffic off and helping the overall system. It wasn't connected to anything else, so we had a lot of independence to get that built and launched without worrying that it would negatively impact other parts of the system. That was sort of our first step. And again, I think if you can find a way to build something small without knocking over the house of cards, there are many CMS systems. The next project for us was what we call the streamlined application, or application 2.0, and that allowed people to go through the application with a smaller set of screens, like down from 76 to 16. And we only handled a subset of users there, and the other application existed side by side with it. So again, there was less pressure. If something had gone wrong there, we had a really nice sort of fallback mechanism, a safety valve. So that was another way of sort of relieving the impacts of that potential system. And then the third for us, which was after the open enrollment ended, was we launched the scalable login system, which was the new identity management system. That was a true swap out, 1-for-1. And so that was sort of the most impactful, but I think we had, we didn't try something like that for our first project. We ran through a couple of projects and got a good sense of where the pain points were and where the integration issues might be before we went to something that big. So I think as you think about CMS projects, you think about a way that you can sort of start small with minimal impact to prove out an idea, and then building upon that to greater levels of complexity is a way that we've been successful.
Thank you.
So the last question for
I'm sorry.
It's
Deidre Gray with Harris Corporation. We're a large business. 70% of our work comes from the federal government. A very small percentage comes from CMS. What kind of advice would you give large businesses? I hear a lot of advice for small businesses and 8As and hub zones. But what type of advice would you give large businesses that excel with other federal agencies on how to do business with CMS and with you?
Well, I think again, one is to make sure you're on vehicles that we're using. So So encourage all large businesses to be on our local vehicle coming out for Spark. And then we also, as I said, use some of the other vehicles, GWAC, so if you're there, that's great. Yeah, I know it's probably a little more challenging as a large business to team with other larges, but I think that's one opportunity to potentially gain experience. I think obviously large businesses have an interest in bringing on small businesses to meet their own small business subcontracting plans and goals. But you know, if you have particular skill sets and capabilities that are beneficial to the agency, I think you know, still partnering and teaming with another contractor that's all on their vehicles we currently are doing business with, I would certainly advocate you know, looking for some of those opportunities. Again, I think it's getting the experiences and being able to indicate that you understand what we're doing and have an innovative solution. But again, I think you know, one of the challenges in IT contracting is to get onto the vehicles that we're using to procure from. So I'm not sure you know, your particular situation, but again, Spark will be an opportunity. We advocate to people, and usually again mostly for smalls, but your partner is really important. So you know, choose wisely kind of approach, because again, you know, your reputation and also on the line with the companies that you partner with. So again, past performance is becoming more and more important. You know, CMS, but throughout the federal government, and I think it'll drive more and more, you know, and become a greater factor in making future selections of you know, how well somebody's performed in the past. So again, we advocate teaming and coming up with the right teaming situations to gain experience and getting exposure within the environment. And that would be my list.
So one more question only, and then we can come back to the Q&A section, please. So Casey, you're taking anyone in particular?
Thank you very much. My name is Connie John with Tesla Science and Technology, and we are AV and SDA supporting CMS. So I have actually two questions, but if you don't have time, maybe you can have the question answered later. The first question is for Don, the second is more towards George and John. So Don, we appreciate that CMS, GMS make a lot of effort in communicating with the industry, including the forecast. Our suggestion is that because usually before the RFPs are released, there usually is a silent period between the industry and OEG the program. So we don't get any communications before the RFPs are out. And we're wondering whether you could consider announcing either on FBO or any way that let's say, hey, we have decided this contract vehicle. And so we all will be much better to prepare, and you will also receive much higher quality response. Because otherwise we'll just last minute scrambling to form our team. So that's the first question. The second question very quickly, it's related to the USDS involvement with CMS program. We understand that your administrator has encouraged the program folks to involve, and Don, you mentioned that too. So I'm wondering, how do you balance USDS's very different approach with CMS TRA requirements, the framework, and also your XLC data groups? Thank you.
Sure, so maybe I can talk a little bit about how we've done Agile and how we've had successes, because I actually do think we've found a nice balance there between them. So my team, we've been doing Agile in a variety of formats for probably about 4 years now. I think in particular over the last 18 months, we've really moved to where Agile is our development methodology. And what Agile means to me, probably what it meant at the start, we've grown our definition a little bit. What it meant to me at the start was, sort of 2-week sprints and being able to demonstrate a product at the end of those sprints. And I think that's an important part of it, but really what we've tried to do is to build a life cycle that we're using for the development in my team that sort of fits inside the CMS XLC, so there's an agile life cycle that fits in there. And we're working very closely with the team that, with the TRD and the team that manages the XLC and those sorts of things to make sure that that's reflected. But I think by broadening it, we really, we've tried to keep the requirements, the discovery phase, if you will, agile. And I think a lot of this really comes down to it's process, but there's also, it's a big culture change to really be on the Agile. And you have to have sort of tool sets to support it, I would say. Now, in our team in particular, we sort of settled on a set of tool sets. We're using Jira for our ALM to capture user stories. We assign them to sprints, we're tracking them there. And then we're using GitHub for development. I think you could use any number of tools, to be honest, to be successful. But having the tool sets to support the work is really important. And so again, for us, we start when a project comes in, when it gets initiated, we go through a discovery phase. We define the user stories and we start assigning them to sprints and we take that through to release. I think the important thing is all the systems I described earlier, we've gone through multiple rounds actually of security audits on them now. We have, our deliverables are probably in a slightly different format than teams might be used to. We tend not to have the Word document of requirements, but we can go back into our ALM tool and generate that list of requirements. And so we've been able to satisfy all the questions that the auditors have had around traceability. And so I think, again, when you look at Agile, I believe it can work in CMS. Sometimes I'll present and people will say, like, how do you get around all the requirements? We're not trying, we're not getting around anything, and we're not trying to get around anything. We're trying to be agile, but to meet the requirements that CMS and HHS and the White House have for IT products, and we've been able to do that pretty successfully, again, by standardizing on a set of tools. I think the other thing that I would say is it is important, and one of the reasons I want to get sort of agile sort of officially ensconced in the XLC is I don't view agile as an excuse to not have a process. It is a process. It's a documented, repeatable process. It's a little bit more lightweight, but it isn't sort of an invitation for each team to sort of do what they want. And so we surround the agile development teams. We've got project managers. We have technical writers that can work on the documentations with those teams. We have teams of testers, and so we've sort of built up. Whenever we're doing an agile project, we have a sort of core set of competencies that go into a team that's running one of those projects. I think one of the great benefits is we have seen cost savings. We run leaner teams on the teams that are doing agile, and the product owners, we call them, the individual that's sort of responsible inside CMS for that product getting built and launched. They're very close to the development teams in a way that we weren't able to do before, so that's a great sort of success factor or outcome of this process. But again, it doesn't mean that the development teams sort of have free reign to go off and just build with that. So again, our experience with both the USDS and the 18F teams and the CMS teams is that they've both been able to see us achieving what they want to see, which is the quicker time to having a releasable product, a demonstratable product, a product in production, but meeting the CMS requirements as well.
Well, I appreciate your comment back. I think that is an area that we're looking to improve on in communicating what our ultimate strategy ends up being for procuring. Ultimately, our vision is to have a contractor portal that comes into CMS and where we're exchanging information back and forth so that more timely we can actually update our forecasts and identify the particular way we're going to move forward. We do appreciate, we get a lot of input, so when we post your request for information or switch to salt notice, we're very appreciative. We thank the industry for coming back with thoughtful comments on those. It's important to us. That helps us to ultimately drive the way in which we want to procure our needs. And so we need to do a better job there. We're trying to come up with ways. Ultimately, again, we're not there yet, but we'd like to have a portal that actually, we get proposals in, we get invoices, we get deliverables all coming through kind of a portal into CMS. We're not there yet, but we recognize we need to do a little better at communicating the ultimate course we take. And hopefully in the future it'll be a little bit more locked in if we get back to our IDIQs. We're doing a lot more things outside because, again, as we try to identify small business capabilities and whether a requirement should be set aside for small businesses, then we're also trying to, right now we don't have an internal method to get to small businesses, so we're looking for what's the best way to attract the right small businesses? Is that through CIOs, through small business? Is that through Schedule 70? Is that potentially 8A competition? So we're looking through those. But we don't always communicate the end result. I recognize that.
Thank you, Don. So very engaging discussion. Thank you, everyone. So CMS actually a lot of work is driven by legislation, and with legislation is aggressive deadline mandate. We all maybe just remember, yesterday we just had the Medicare Modernization Act, and then today we have, ACA. And so, do you think that Agile is basically the solution for most of the initiatives moving forward, or what is your perspective on that?
So Agile, like any big organization, because everybody knows I've been at CMS since 2003, and really I've been lucky enough to be involved in the standards in one way or another. And I've seen it grow and evolve, and that's the key word there, is how we evolve and change. How is the industry changing, the different methodologies around here. Agile is part of it, and I think that was part of Spark's trip. Hopefully everybody got to see that. The CMMI is one of the big sort of certifications out there, but there's no certification for Agile that we're aware of today. So that's when you see the message from the CMS saying to you, yes, we are looking for the CMMI, we are looking for the standardized processes. We do have systems that fit it down the middle in terms of operating and following the structure. But at the same time, with this other side, where they do apply, sort of what John was in terms of time to deliver, it seems to be we have to deliver fast, depending on the program needs. So for those programs, it's Agile. So it's not like one versus the other. It's an understanding when to apply each of the structured processes to CMS. But in order to do that, and one of the things, and I'm glad to see that a lot of people here are doing business with CMS, because it's important. And this is where, this is where you have to do a little bit of your own homework in terms of understanding CMS programs, okay? Understanding what the drivers and sort of the priorities that we have across, whether it's Medicare, whether it's healthcare, whether it's the Medicaid programs, or program integrity. I mean, those programs are unique in terms of what they're looking for. As I sit here, looking for the enterprise, how do we bring the enterprise together? Yes, our IT is distributed. There's an IT shop within John's organization, and we work together, and I'm bringing everything to the enterprise. But that's the key, is ensuring that you understand the programs. So the typical workforce architecture is, as you have seen it, and the reason I mentioned this is 2015, was before we used to be very product specific. And we mandated, we were standardizing a specific vendor. But we learned that market has changed. The open source community has sort of transformed the way we do business out there. So we got to be open to that. And that's one of the reasons we're here, to sort of let you know that we are open to that. But Agile comes with a context. Yes, you can move fast. You can move forward. And one of the analogies that I always use, because it's easily understandable, is sort of like building a house in an Agile way. You still need to see what the house is going to look like before you start an Agile. If you don't have the whole context, and you begin Agile, you can build the most beautiful kitchen in the world in an Agile form, but if it ends up in the basement, is that what you want? So we need to understand the whole picture before we begin. And that's what John was saying about the context. Yeah, we don't take shortcuts. You still need to build that context in terms of how does this system fit in CMS's sort of ecosystem. And then once that's determined in terms of the different functionality from a high-level perspective, and the scope of the project, then you can begin your Agile transformation where it makes sense to do so. But in other pieces, as you sort of integrate and interact with other existing systems within CMS, it may be a different approach. So it's not one versus the other. It's making sure when is it proper to use Agile versus our traditional processes that we have. They don't go away. I mean, CMI is still we want to practice around because, they show us that you are structured. There is a process. And we're still supporting that. But we want to sort of also embrace Agile.
Thank you very much. That's very clear because as John mentioned, the roadmap needs to be there so that we can build to get there, right? So, very much appreciated. You mentioned about the technical reference, right? And to support agility, basically, understand the CMS moving more toward the capability-driven technical reference from a technology specific. Can you share your perspective on that?
So it's not in terms of, as sort of mentioned earlier, we're trying to move away from vendor specific. And I think that virtual data center contract vehicle, that was one of the first steps that we took in buying services, capabilities versus CMS. You know, that's when we changed the paradigm, going from government-owned equipment to be more contract-owned equipment and contract-owned operators. So we're going from the go-code to the co-code mode. Because that's our approach. We want to, industries out there, especially when it comes to data centers. You've been out there, you know what to do. I mean, CMS is there. That's where we sort of engage industry to learn and challenge some of those things that they brought to us. But at the same time, that's one aspect of capabilities when it comes to data hosting and the infrastructure. But then from the services, the capability, the same sort of concept. And the technical reference architecture is really a framework by which the sort of structure is a set of rules. Look at it like any sport, you have rules, but you still can be creative. And that's the challenge that you have, is how can you be creative and innovative within that framework? Because at the end of the day, that framework helps us, CMS, to be standardized to allow the integration across the enterprise. We want all projects and all firms to sort of follow that framework, because we know that no system in CMS, and hopefully everybody sort of sees this, they don't live alone. Every system needs, it may be one specific case when a system has the opportunity to launch first and doesn't have any integration, but sooner or later you have to integrate. Sooner or later, if it's at further integrity, you need beneficiary, you need provider. I mean, there's always that sort of reach back into the enterprise. So following the framework allows us to make that integration, position the system to be integrated across the enterprise. So services is something that we want to, I mean, this is not new. I think I just, at the very beginning of the session, around to somebody that I worked with, that was in a project with, and back then, this was 4 or 5 years ago, we're talking about SOA, service-oriented architecture. I mean, that still hasn't gone away. I mean, the services, it's just changed how, the names, how it's evolved, but the concept's still there. One of the actual services that we created, especially supporting the marketplace, was the enterprise eligibility service, which, the data services hub actually has one of the, it has at a center that basic principle and uses multiple services to sort of complete that the marketplace is trying to get the eligibility from multiple sort of agencies across the federal government. So that's the concept that we want to follow in terms of capability. I mean, we don't want to create something that cannot be leverageable down the road. It may not be, I'm not saying that it has to be from day one, but you need to position yourself. Okay, how can this be sort of extendable to the enterprise? Maybe not today, because I understand there's scopes, there's dates, there's budgets. Well, how do you position yourself to allow that down the road? So we don't have to sort of reinvent or recreate things. And that's, if you ever come to a technical review board meeting where I'm sitting, that's always what I'm looking for. How do we create extendability and position ourselves more than the enterprise?
Thank you very much, George. And framework extended enterprise, interconnection. So can you share with us the top 3 CMS capabilities that the CMS needs at this point?
So, I mean, John mentioned one of them, Agile. We've been doing a big investment from a capability perspective, not only just software, but even from an approach, from processes. Agile is one way I think John has done a lot of that work. So we are working together to take those lessons learned and apply it across the enterprise. We are working with the new organization that was created supporting the CIO, the Office of Enterprise Information, to set those standards across the agency. We have done some early work in Agile in terms of coming up with some early guidance, but we want to change that to become more of a standard way of doing business. And not to take away from Agile, but what's Agile mean to our CMS? Because that, to me, is the biggest key in here, implementing any new technology. What is the context to CMS? The other area is big data. we are pushing forward with that. We just recently sort of did a major upgrade to our big data infrastructure. And that's something that I view, and that should be a common shared service across the agency. If you think about it, at the end of the day, most programs always want to know the 360 view, whether it's the beneficiary, whether it's the provider, or whether it's the pilot or something. So having that data in multiple places really doesn't provide or position the enterprise, but having them all together and sort of be more practical from that perspective. So that's another place where we sort of, you will hear me say this consistently, hopefully, that that's one area that I think CMS can benefit to bring the concept of the data lake, to bring together a lot of analytics that doesn't have to be at the program specific level, because you need data from multiple programs to sort of get that consolidated or holistic view of the different sort of program, beneficiary providers. So we move it forward, and for us, that's a capability. And the last one I'll say is the cloud. And John will speak to that some more. And what does the cloud mean to CMS? We started out with AWS. And now say this, AWS is great. I mean, they're very mature in terms of they were born in the cloud, they're in the cloud, so they are out there. They're teaching us a few things. What we learned about the cloud is that it's too flexible. That they actually give you way less. And sometimes may not be what you want, right? So how do we sort of add CMS's context around it to allow that integration between programs that are in the cloud? Because what we don't want is have the cloud and we're silos within the cloud. And that's what we're trying to sort of help away from it. So we're working very closely with John's organization. Obviously, they have to lead, they've been out there more. How do we bring the virtual data center in the cloud together to allow that further integration across all our programs and avoid silos even within the cloud? Because that can be that's what I was saying. So you get what you ask for, but you may not need what you want. We're trying to sort of create those standards to ensure that the technical reference architecture can apply in a different way, and not the spirit of it, to allow that integration, whatever it is. Those are
So talking about cloud and business success on the cloud computing implementation, you can save costs, you can improve quality, right? Can you share the success?
Sure. So I think, of sort of the things I'm going to talk about are almost a three-legged stool. And so I think the first is agile development. I think to go along with that, a really key success factor for us, for the projects we're running, has been a cloud environment. So we've been in AWS for about a year and a half. We've just completed an award under the VDC contract that actually sort of expands that ability to other CMS projects to go into that environment. So that's very exciting. We've got a sort of a queued up list of systems that have said, I want to come in, I want to be next. I think to me a couple of things, really the success for us was the ability to give those agile development teams the development resources they needed. That has been a challenge for us in the past, and so as projects come along, this idea of a prototype or just testing something out is something you can do in a cloud. You can spin up capacity, try something and turn it back down in a more of a traditional data center. There's a lengthy acquisition cycle, and once you, even if it's in a sort of a COCO model, what we've seen is once you buy it, you've got it sort of for at least a year. So having that real-time ability to get environments out there has been a huge thing that's enabled productivity for our development teams. So again, to me, Agile and the cloud have really gone hand in hand and have enabled, one has enabled the success of the other. I think to George's point, I think it is very important for us, for CMS, to establish standards in the cloud, and that's maybe at a couple of tiers. So we're, for now, we are in Amazon Web Services. Amazon has a set of services that are available for government use, meaning they've gone through a FedRAMP audit. We've audited our Amazon environment, and we've audited it as a GSS, which means that all of those common controls are available to be inherited by any project that comes into CMS, into the CMS AWS environment. And what that means is that when you do an audit in that environment, all you really need to worry about are your application level controls. So a lot of that is taken care of for you. That brings it in line sort of with the BDCs where, you know, it's not more work to audit a system in Amazon. And then I think on top of that, we've worked very closely. We've got, you know, our contractors and some really good teaming arrangements there. We've established standardized gold images, so we have a Windows environment that a team can use in AWS if they have a Windows-based application. We have a Red Hat Linux environment, and those are hardened and approved for use. They have all of the standard monitoring tools that are needed, so the security team, the CISO's office, the SOCs, have great visibility into what's happening in that environment. And I think, you know, the future for us really lies in the governance of that environment. So again, when projects want to come in, what we've developed are sort of two sets of questionnaires. We have a pre-screening questionnaire. And I think it's important to note, I think I would say a lot of CMS systems would benefit greatly from being in a cloud. I think there's also a good number that would really be sort of a bad fit for a cloud. And knowing that, you know, knowing that we're putting the right systems in that environment, I think is important. You do have to have a team that's a little bit more hands-on than you do in a traditional BDC. And so having those resources lined up is important. And so we take projects through that stage, and then we have them sort of complete a detailed questionnaire so you can identify any things that might be red flags or roadblocks to coming into a cloud environment. And then beyond that, I think it's what we want to do is identify capabilities that are needed by more than one team and standardize those. An example that George and I were just talking about before this meeting is containers. Docker is an example if people are familiar with that at all. Containers are a way of sort of running multiple instances of an application on a single VM, so you can actually get more work done out of a single server. It's a great sort of cost-saving mechanism. Containers are very new even in the commercial space. They're really, really bleeding edge in the government space, but there's a lot of interest. And so what we're trying to figure out is how can we build sort of an approved standard for containers that we can put in place with AWS, that then as applications can come in, again, they can inherit those controls, they can use that as a standard platform, and not every application coming in there is building their own instantiation of a containers platform. So that's the future for us. But again, we've seen a lot of success. We've built systems that have very high scale in Amazon, and we've never had issues there. We've had systems with a very strong security posture. We've been successful from that perspective. And again, just the agility that I mentioned for teams to try things out is something that we never had before we were in the cloud.
Thank you, John. And everyone of us probably know that success got to be ongoing. So can you share with us any barriers that you implement cloud solutions, right? And how you address them? I think you mentioned a lot of your solution already, but
yeah, so I do think, we got the AWS environment turned around very quickly, but there was a lot that we learned along the way. I think, as I mentioned, probably the biggest thing to be aware of is in Amazon. You've got to have a team. You're sort of closer to the systems. When you're deploying systems, a lot of times you're actually bringing down. But our deploys for the systems that I described earlier actually tend to consist of us bringing up a new set of servers, verifying that they're working, and turning the old ones off. That's a very different model than we've seen in a traditional data center. So you've got to have teams that can sort of operate in that model. The other thing it's a great power, but a lot of responsibility comes with power. Is in Amazon, almost everything that you do is done through APIs, rather than somebody doing things manually. And that's really great in the sense that you can actually treat your infrastructure as code. The scripts that we use to build those environments, we manage in version control, the way that we would manage an application code, so that's a very different way of doing things. But again, those APIs require expertise in knowing how they work and using them properly, and so you need to have the teams that can get familiar with the environment. And again, we have contractors that are responsible for some of that, but some of that falls to the application teams. So getting familiar with that whole mode of working and understanding of the platform capabilities is a new responsibility for the application teams in a way that it hasn't been. That would be a big one that I would mention. And I think, again, you know, when you're in, this is maybe a little bit more of an issue when you're in Amazon as opposed to one of the VDCs. We're in a changing environment. We are a customer of Amazon's. I think CMS is a pretty important customer to them, but we are one of, you know, tens of thousands. And so that platform is evolving, and so you need to be keeping up with what's changing on the platform, and as Amazon is versioning their APIs and those sorts of things. So again, there's a little bit of additional work and responsibility there that you wouldn't see in a traditional VDC hosting scenario.
Thank you very much. Question for industry. So I'm not taking question yet. So my question is, who are the small businesses again? Right, only you can answer the question here. and probably two people, what do you think? Usually, you know, talking about cloud computing, you have large businesses, you know, they do this and that. I do want to see small businesses that did actually have hands-on implementation on cloud for your customer and your innovation strategy. Can you raise your hand? Very good. Two. Okay, so Casey, I cannot see anyone. Can you pick two people who can share 3 sentences about your cloud implementation?
Hi. Yes, we, before AWS was popular, we actually had to implement our own solution. So we had VMware, virtual machines. We had to automate a lot of our things. So DevOps, before DevOps became DevOps, we were a small shop, so we had to be agile. So we offered hosting solutions for .govs for the last 10 years. As AWS and Bedrock has become popular, we've been switching out the back end for our customers where we actually will burst out to AWS and use their capability to scale while still having sort of infrastructure that we have developed internally. So a combination of that. And we're probably going to be moving more towards AWS, but still we have the familiarity of managing all the virtual machines and everything else, doing the coding, doing the source control for the configuration management, using Puppet,
Thank you. What's your company name?
It's Devis.
Great. Thank you. One more, please.
Hey, Jason Love with Natoma Technologies. We have a prime contract with GSA Public Building Services to take a mission-critical application called Electronic Project Management. So we took the application out of their ESC data center and moved it to the Gulf Cloud region. I'm one of the non-technical guys, so bear with me.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry, just one thing I would mention real quick, just as context. So for people that aren't familiar with AWS, GovCloud is a facility that they've set up in Oregon that has lots of controls, sort of unique to the federal government. And one of those is like, you know, not having any sort of foreign staff work on the systems, things around arms control and those sorts of things. There's also, there's what's called AWS East, there's AWS West. HHS had actually done a FedRAMP ATO for AWS East and West, so there are lots of government clients in there, there's commercial clients. That's actually the regions that CMS uses, and one of the reasons is that GovCloud is relatively constrained from a resource perspective. It's a smaller data center than a lot of the others. CMS's systems are very big systems. We get lots and lots of traffic, and so you know, looking at things, that was the best fit for us, and it had a FedRAMP ATO, and so if people are, you know, looking at that at all, it's important to note that CMS is using the AWS East and West regions for all of our work with the VPC contract.
Thank you, John. And basically, industry actually has your clients within multiple agencies. So as you collaborate with CMS, you have that opportunity and share, you know, information of how you implement in other agencies, so you can learn from each other. Right? So George, you did mention shared services and integration and how loosely the cloud could be. Can you share your vision more on how to make it tighter?
So one one of the things, and actually, this was a term that was coined by Gartner, actually, the enterprise as a service. And I think that captures, my personal opinion, how we want CMS to become in terms of the different projects and the different efforts that go along this large agency. There's a lot of work, and bringing everything together becomes challenging because there are different timelines. We're trying to deliver the work. You are in a position, you have your projects that is expected of you to deliver in a certain amount of time in the scope. So, but at the same time, you have the enterprise that is there. They're right next to you and saying, hey, don't forget about it. Don't just think about this one quarter. So what advice that I would give everyone before I jump into share service is this. And I know that this only applies to those that sort of get contracted to get awarded with work to engage CMS. Use the technical review board as a resource for you. Any questions? As soon as you get an award, Brian, you get any question you are unsure in terms of the details. One is the proposal, but then it's the execution. Use the TO. We're there for you. It's a resource for everyone. And I view this interaction really as a two-way conversation. Yes, we're here to inform you, but at the same time, I view you as our partners. And you are engaging with CMS federal staff in terms of services for their project needs. So, sometimes we are doing our work internally, but at the same time, we ask all contractors to be partners with us and live in them in terms of what we're trying to do. They are very product-focused in terms of supporting the business needs of CMS and the agency. But at the same time, when it comes to technical details, you're there, you're the expert. They're looking to you. And working with us, we become a partnership, and we'll deliver a stronger solution at the end. So we don't have to do rework, and that's the one thing we're trying to avoid. And the reason I mention this is, especially when there's new businesses that engage with us, it's new. CMS is new. Others still learn about CMS every day in terms of what we're doing and things that happen. So there is a service, a board for people out there. I know that DRB has overseen over 2,000 different projects across the years. There's a lot. We see the agency, we see every flavor of design that there is out there potentially, but we still get surprised. And the surprises are good because innovation is happening. We want to embrace it. The innovation is doing it with a balance, meaning not so much the leading edge, but what is the leading edge. And the bigger one is really about ensuring at the end of the day the sustainability of whatever product we implement. Just open source is great out there, but open source is like any tool where if you don't know what to do with it, just like John was saying about containers, if you don't have the experience, you can do damage. So that's what we're looking for, making sure you feel comfortable with whatever you're proposing, because at the end of the day, you have to maintain it. And at the end of the day, we want to make sure that it's not a new technology, so new, there's only a handful of people that know about it. Because the reach back to support, when you run into issues, becomes troublesome, and then it puts you in a bad position as well. So there is a balance. Innovation is great, but we got to pick, just like when we were saying earlier about agile versus traditional, the same thing when it comes to innovation. There's some projects out there that perhaps are more, they're not so visible and new. And the way they're sort of presented, perhaps they deliver more risk in terms of using the new technologies. And those perhaps you can take more sort of be more adventurous, if you will. I just put that in quotes because in reality, we want to make sure that it's solid at the end of the day. But at the same time, we want to push that innovation. But when there's other projects where we know that we can't afford that, we need to go with what we know. So you have to make that decision when you propose in terms of that solution you're bringing forward to CMS. So shared service is the same thing. I say this because DevOps is something that's out there. It's new, it's great, you have the teams together, but there has to be sort of, DevOps has a very sort of software development sort of in the infrastructure to work together, deliver things quickly and faster, but at the same time, have to be a process control is about that. And sometimes what I see is, in the spirit of DevOps, keep adding all kinds of open source products. And products that mimic some of the shared services that we already have. For instance, business intelligence tools are a big one. We have a whole set of infrastructure set up already. And as I was saying earlier today about the data lake, so all of those business intelligence tools are already connected to it. So when you bring in new tools into it, not only do they have to sort of go through this authority to operate, this security assurance and so forth, now that's a brand new tool someone has to maintain. So it's a higher cost to the government and it's more of a burden to go through. So shared services really it's important because what we're trying to do is make it easier on you. You're trying to deliver a product. There's a lot of things out there. So don't reinvent the wheel. Use the TRB as a resource for what's out there. I understand you may not know, but there's a team out there that can sort of find the answers for you, give you direction or some guidance on what's in existence. So you have to own these. When you getting your teams together, your scope should be what is it that I need to deliver from the team for the project that I've been contracted. Don't bring a new business intelligence to it. You already have. We have cognitive, and we are looking into other ones as well. So the whole infrastructure, they're sort of integrated within the VDC context already. So why bring in? That's the question you're gonna get in terms of shared services. I mean, the other ones that we're going after, and I think this is, hopefully, the word is getting around, is the enterprise model. The industry has been very vocal in terms of, this is something that is becoming more and more. I mean, we always know that this was something that we needed to bring together in terms of, especially the professional sort of community that does business with CMS. They want to come to one place. They want to know that from a security perspective, knowing that this is a sanctioned CMS website or point of entry, because today's, with the new technologies out there, you can make anything look like anything. So how can you sort of be sure that this is a valid government? So the portal is trying, it's been around now for a couple of years, but we're still trying to sort of bring things, and we evolve in that too. So I'm always open to new ideas in terms of how we can make those shared services more sort of applicable to different programs. The other ones that I mentioned earlier is the identity, EID, or Enterprise Identity and Access Management. That's key for us. That's the normal way to deal with all the sort of cybersecurity incidents that we're hearing out there. That's even one that is pushing more and more in terms of sort of not only to identity group, the identity of individuals, but also how do we authenticate, use some multi-factor, because we know that the hackers today have become so brilliant that they can find the user ID and password no longer works. So you hear more about that, MFA and multi-factor, like two things to sort of get into the system. So that's what EIDN is there for, okay? That's another example in terms of shared services. But going back to the early comment that I was making, so we're going to bring a little back about a term that Gardner sort of coined, like the enterprise as a service. That's the key. So I view every opportunity as a shared service. Yes, we have some sanctioned shared services, some capabilities that CMS is sort of invested and there for you to use, but at the same time, the new projects that are created, if they can be positioned in such a way that allows CMS to use them in a shared service, that makes us look better. And yes, there are some issues around maintainability, things like that, the governance aspect of things, and it's a journey. It's not the answer, but it's getting us there.
Right. Thank you, George. And what you described is basically aligned with the federal IT shared services strategy that we recognize as well. So for industry, you have observed other shared services that CMS could benefit from developing, right? You was talk about auto, EIDM, but there are other services that are there for several reachability services, right? And other things. So as you recognize the opportunity to recommend CMS, you don't have to recommend here. You can recommend here if you want to, but you can go to CMS and through other channels to make those recommendations. So anyone volunteer, you have any comments on the shared services? All right, Casey, help me out as well.
Just going back to earlier what you were talking about, George, you mentioned using the TRB as a guide. I think it's not publicly available on the CMS website anymore. Is it possible CMS could reconsider that decision and make it publicly available again?
We do have an effort underway today to review, and I think you mean the technical reference architecture, a set of documents that sort of spells out the different things and how the technical environment for CMS, that framework that I was referring to earlier. Yeah, there is a, actually they were public at one point. And unfortunately, or fortunately, as with the security audit, it seemed to be a little, they were telling too much about CMS. Although the theories themselves are evolving in terms of how the information is sort of collapsed, moving away from technology, very technology agnostic in terms of vendors and things of that nature, we're trying to go with a true data framework. But today we are working with the CISO, the Chief Information Security Officer, to evaluate those documents to see if they can be shared in some fashion or perhaps create a version out there that sort of is available to the public to just give you sort of the spirit of what we mean. Because we understand it's difficult for you to know a technical environment unless you have those documents that can tell you how you want to architect it. So we are looking into that and we're working on it.
Thank you.
One more.
Hi, this is Deetra Gray with Harris again. Don, you mentioned that there are some standard tools that you already have in place that you're using. How open and what would be the process of introducing new tools? As you know, technology grows every 6 months, maybe even faster. So in an effort to keep CMS from using older, outdated tools, what are some of the mechanisms or processes you would suggest?
And may I ask what you like?
Well, you mentioned your BI tools, for instance. You mentioned that there are some standard tools that are currently being used.
So the challenge is, as any organization, I'm sure you have that as you bring in the capability of the company, is when we bring a new tool there, the key here is to ensure that it aligns with a business, a clear business. Because having that, because when you stand up something new, I mean, this is just basic. You need a staff to manage, you need contractors, you need a budget, an ongoing budget. So it adds a burden. So we got to be able to understand and ensure that this is exactly what CMS is doing. The program that is requesting that tool really needs it as a good justification for it. And it's a challenge we can't get away from, especially when it comes to FTEs, contractor support, and budgets. In our current situation, we try to be very cognizant of the needs, but balance it out in terms of whether we can afford to procure, not just procure for the one time. This is an ongoing cost, year after year, can you sustain that? So it's making sure that it's supporting that business. We're not close to it, that's the one thing I want to make sure. I'm open to anything that's out there, or it has to be in the context of our program needs, and making sure that it's supported. Because those are the types of points that I will bring to the program office as I meet with them. I said, you're trying to innovate, create this new technology. Have you considered this whole list of things? If you want to bring in new technology, have you considered a whole list of things? And making sure they clearly understand that what they sort of embarking into, and make sure they can support that moving forward.
Thank you. We have 5 more minutes, and I would like to have one last topic, which is very interesting actually. We talk about collaboration, communication, and measurement to successfully deliver a CMS, right? Can you talk more about your DevOps concept or implementation that
Sure. So I think particularly on the healthcare.gov work, we have implemented a DevOps model. And as I said earlier, that's sort of the third leg of our stool of how we've tied these things together. What DevOps means for us is that we have teams. On those teams, we have developers and we have production operation teams. Those teams work very closely together. I mentioned, that in the AWS environment, we're actually controlling our infrastructure as code. So the ops team is responsible for managing that code. They're using the same version control system, the same repositories that the developers are. And we have those teams working very closely together. So as development is underway, as we bring a feature into a sprint to develop it, the ops team is actually aware of what's coming. a couple of weeks in advance as the release moves through the lower environments that are tracking that. And so when a release goes into production, that team that's managing the production release knows exactly what's in there. And as George mentioned, we've got a set of monitoring tools, and we've tried to standardize those as much as we can in the marketplace. We've actually gotten to a really good place. So we use things like New Relic for looking at our servers. We've got Mixpanel for event tracking. Again, there are a whole host of tools that we've done that do this. We sort of landed on a couple that are working well for us. And so again, as things are going into production, those things are watched very carefully so we know right away that the release is performing as it's expected to. And the handoffs, as something goes into production, are very clean. The last principle that I think is really important out of all of this is, I sort of mentioned this, but we're trying to be as transparent through the whole process as we can. GitHub, where we're doing our development and our version control and source code management, the product owners have visibility into that. In addition to the developers, the operations team has visibility into that. Vice versa, the production monitoring systems, the developers can see the New Relic dashboard, so they can watch those as well. And so we want everybody to have visibility into that process, regardless of their role in that process, so that everybody can see the same thing. What we've seen in the past, in worlds where we don't have more of a DevOps model, is you've got a production operations team saying, something looks wrong. Development team, can you look into this? And the development team is sort of going like, I don't know where to look. And so, again, with the same eyes on everything, it's been really, really powerful to getting us to resolving problems that pop up in production, to have fewer of them, but when they happen, to get them resolved more quickly. So that's a model that we're trying to broaden out and expand to more of our work.
Is there any infrastructure requirement that you all need to implement in addition to the current one in order to support the role of the developer and the operation team, to support that part of operation?
I mean, I would say we've got, particularly as mentioned in the marketplace, we've got that. I think it's sort of we're discussing in CMS how we, sort of bring that more broadly. And, I think as George mentioned, we've got some projects doing Agile, some not, for good reasons. And so I think we need to figure out how we bring those things more broadly. Where are the criteria where that model makes sense?
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. So that concludes our session. And we have a Q&A. We have 15-minute Q&A. So now we can start.
Can you hear me? Okay. This question is for mostly John, but for you, George, as well. By the way, I'm Sid Roman. I'm the VMware's account executive to HHS, which is through CMS as well. The question I have is, there are other cloud offers, including from our own company, that are FedRAMP, just as robust, and they pride themselves to be most cost-effective. So is AWS a monopoly? Is there any other room for other cloud offers?
We can maybe get back to you on that. I would defer to my colleagues in OTS that actually run the VDC contract. For me personally, I think having, competition is always a good thing. The VDC itself, we brought numerous vendors to the table there. So I would say CMS has not closed the door. I'm looking at other cloud vendors, and as I've talked a lot about the AWS capabilities, but we are trying, to the extent possible, that our cloud implementations are really vendor neutral, and that we could, vendors that meet the 5 criteria that NIST has established for being a cloud environment that host and support the systems that we're building to run in AWS today.
And so today we have 2 clouds. We have AWS and Terraform. Both are act as our cloud provider. But as John was saying, we are one of the intermediate, so that's what we have to take our time, understand, and learn, because we're learning a lot of tremendous different things from the cloud providers, what it means to do business with the cloud. CMS really is trying to ensure, especially now with all of the cybersecurity and integration, is how much do we, because really, we integrate the cloud, we're sort of expanding our footprint out to the cloud. And how do we secure our property? So for us, it's a learning experience on how we work with Airmark and AWS. And they're trying to take those best practices and expand. But we are looking to expand at some point, but we need to have our learning experience in our belt to sort of take the next step. So there won't be a monopoly between those.
Next question.
Hi there, back in the nosebleeds here. I have two quick questions for you. The first, with relation to Spark, you're probably going to get somewhere in the neighborhood of hundreds of proposals. And you mentioned some interesting processes you're looking for down the road, about down select. Can you speak to potentially how you may look, or if you might have a down select process or anything else surrounding Spark? That's question number one. Question number two, which is more program-centric, just dovetailing in on the comment about cloud. It seems like we've got some good processes here around infrastructure as a service and versioning up to platform as a service. Perhaps you could comment about the interoperability as you look at other service models, such as platform as a service, software as a service, and how either Docker is very much a technology for infrastructure for platforms, but how you may look at some of those and some of the other standards in the TRA in the future. Thank you.
So I think your first question about Spark, we're not planning any type of a down select process related to Spark. There will be an assessment. We recognize there's huge interest, and we're happy to receive as many proposals from great companies as we can get. But it will be we'll go through the normal process for selecting holders on the multiple award holders for the IAC. I think the phased approaches or other approaches will come once the IAC is put in place and we complete particular projects or task orders underneath of that.
Sure. So I think, we actually are working in CMS on there were a couple of cloud TRA supplements. We're actually evolving those to sort of reflect our current state. I think the question of PaaS is a really good one. We are looking at how we could leverage things like Docker to get to more of a platform. And I mentioned some of the challenges associated with putting a system in the cloud today. Our goal ultimately is to sort of minimize those and not sort of require the application teams coming into AWS to have that level of cloud expertise. So we're looking to build our capabilities there and abstract some of that stuff away, which again helps with the notion of multiple sort of cloud providers like that at some point.
All right, going around the twice. Oh, okay.
Virtual channel value on someone that works for a hub zone data analytics data management company. Clearly that hub zone is of interest. You've also talked about USDS, 18F, and Azure development. Are you, and talking specifically about procuring resources to help you with that, are you planning to use 18F's Azure VPA, or are you setting up your own contract vehicle? Can you give us any thoughts? Since they don't have any socioeconomic set aside for having.
Well, our hope is to be able to create Azure capability within the Spark vehicle that we can use to complete personal future Azure work. We're aware of what 18F's do with Azure. I believe that's going to be available to non-GSA for a while, so it's not really it's not something we're planning on right now.
So just a quick question, really more on behalf of ACT-IAC. Based on everything we've discussed today, is there any particular project, initiative, challenge from a small business perspective that you feel like ACT-IAC and the Small Business Alliance could support with? And look at this from a perspective of an objective forum of various small and large companies that can provide feedback. It could be something as specific as we're having challenges with finding qualified hub zones, something specific like challenges around small business and Agile. Is there anything that as a starting point, ACT-IAC could help with? And not everybody at once.
give that some thought, but I mean, I think you hit on, obviously, one, and I think we're getting greater hub zone capabilities being developed. And we encourage, when we go out with source of sauce to, we need to make sure there's, we get competition, and if we're going to set something aside within a particular socioeconomic category. So, but we have had lots of dialogue, and I know our small business specialist is working hard to try to identify both the service disabled veteran-owned firms as well as hub zone firms. That's important at CMS for us to increase our goal. I can't think of anything else off the top of my head. I know we have concerns about keeping a viable small business community to support us at CMS. So obviously Spark is intended to have on-ramp capabilities to continue to keep small businesses in place. I'll say from a small business perspective, we've had some challenges because as our small business contractors became acquired, we basically are losing a lot of our small business credit, so it forces us to either recompete those contracts a lot quicker than we had anticipated doing, which is a huge workload burden on the agency. So also, I guess it's good for small businesses that they become attractive and large businesses may acquire them, and it may be good for their owners and stockholders. It becomes kind of burdensome. So we know there's lots of companies that want to get a pathway into do business with CMS, but that is a challenge for us. As it's one thing when a small business grows and they kind of naturally outgrow their size. It becomes a different matter when companies become acquired as a way we can handle credits for small businesses. So obviously we can't lobby or advocate that small businesses not get acquired, but we're hoping that Spark gives companies opportunities to get into CMS, and that small businesses will stay more viable for a long period of time and allow us to continue to cultivate that small business presence at CMS and continue to be able to achieve our goals. So, those are just my 2 thoughts on small businesses, but I have to think about that.
One more question. I have a question just for George. What is the best process to highlight innovative new technologies to CMS?
From which perspective?
For example, a product vendor may have a great product on security or cloud. How does CMS executives, technology executives come to know and hear from them directly?
So there's a couple ways, and I think with those vendors that I've met with in the past, and that comes, there's multiple rounds in here. One of them would be infrastructure, data services, and for those, CMS's strategic direction is the virtual data center congregate. They're managing the data centers and trying to build there. Again, use this as a shared service, if you will, to make it easier with the contractor community as you're trying to develop. So they act as our integrators in terms of new technologies that come out of the infrastructure level. In terms of the software development efforts and things of that nature with the programs, really, and this is really where you have to know something about us. In terms of, as you propose new things for the program side of things, what does that really mean to the program that we bring innovation? Because sometimes we're learning more and more, and I'll say this, as I see the projects coming through, as I sit with the vendors and meet with all of you, I really take note in terms of what's happening there. In the marketplace, that was one area really that, putting my techie hat on, really was very interesting to me to see how new ideas and new approaches were sort of put forth. That before really we were, very conservative, I would say, because security, for us, security is number one. We gotta protect our data, no breach of the data. So that's sometimes. So is how do we bring those new aspects of our program and making sure that we're not totally disrupting what we're doing today. And I have some specific examples. I don't want to get so much into that, but I know there's ways that you can bring ideas that can sort of create a phased approach of how, if you're trying to, for instance, re-engineer something that we have, it's not like just this knowledge that has to bring a new one, that's the easiest way. But how do you sort of little by little facing this innovation to get a quick win, quick delivery, at the same time without disrupting the ecosystem that has been built around that, existing system, because that's key. No system, as I said earlier, no system lives alone. A number of interconnecting things that are happening behind the scenes, downstream systems that depend on that data. So total disruption is not visible from any perspective, it just be too disruptive. So that's the balance, so we need to know something about it. And I know it's hard if you haven't done business with us, but I think that's one of the things that Don was saying earlier, the partnerships, making sure you have the mentorship programs. That's one of the reasons we came here, because we want to sort of encourage that. That's the best way to learn about us if you haven't done business with us. The partner somebody has. And hopefully they can share that information with you in terms of our programs and our technical environment, because that's getting to know those aspects becomes key to the business and maybe for us to understand where we're coming from when it comes to innovative technologies and self-development. But if this infrastructure, definitely the VCs are our source that we go to as our strategic sort of hosting approach.
Just one more.
Thank you. First of all, thank you all for being here in support of small businesses. Don, you brought up the issue of service-disabled veteran-owned companies. One of the things that I'm seeing in a number of other agencies to ensure that veterans are actually employed under the contracts that are awarded, whether it's to large businesses, small businesses, veteran-owned or not, is an accounting of the number of veterans that are being included in the solutions and the delivery of the services. What is HHS doing from that perspective?
So can I ask you a question? Is that more for VA particular contracts?
Well, it's a VA contract. I've seen it at GSA. I've seen it at DHS.
Okay. I'm not aware of anything in that regard. I think it's a worthy thing. My understanding is that within the VA, they have requirements around that. I wasn't aware of it broadening. So I'm not aware of anything right now within HHS related to hiring a veteran, the percentage of veterans working on that contract. I haven't seen anything on it.
All right, that concludes our session. Thank you everyone for your attention and attendance. Give the speaker a round of applause.